Welcome, friends. Welcome to the Elden Ring stream that was promised. So yeah, it's three white guys on a podcast. Sorry, but Eldrick is Australian, and that is it's culturally it's a little different. I've been to Australia. It's well, we've got hold on, time loop. Let me cease the time loop. I'm professional. I've done this. This is why isn't this okay? Is it gone?
I think it's gone. I don't hear anything.
Is there a
Oh,
ring? Is there feedback? Is there a loop? It's the Elden Ring stream. It's Niners have many rings. That's the see. We've got 5 Super Bowl rings. That's welcome to. Let me just introduce you guys. This is crashing and burning already. Hi. So I'm David Lightbringer, and this stream is about Elden Ring and A Song of Ice and Fire, and the many crossovers between the two. And to my right is Australian native Eldrick Stoneskin. I assume you're a native. You sound native. Say hello, Eldrick.
I am. G'day for a bit of. No, I'm Eldrick Stoneskin. Just want to say thanks for having me back on, David. I've approached Dave with a bit of an outline about Elden Ring. I've been playing the game since it came out. I've been a fan of like Miyazaki and From Software since Dark Souls. And when I heard George was doing something, I had to jump back in and play it and really dive into the lore. So thanks for having me on, man. And yeah, should be a good stream.
Yeah, people have been asking for this forever. It's no secret that George Martin did a lot of the backstory world building for the story for this game, and people have been messaging me periodically for years, including my friend JP, who sent me a PlayStation so I could play the game 2 years ago. That never happened. House of the Dragon happened instead. But shout out because I have a PlayStation sitting downstairs, and even though I never got to play Elden Ring, the energy that was put in has led to this stream. And so to my left is Elden Ring Imposter. Michael talks about stuff. He's not played the game. He's just
I have
researched
not.
stuff on the internet. But he does have a great YouTube channel with a couple of very cool videos that you've put out recently about free will and the Weirwoods and prophecy in Ice and Fire, which I'm totally digging on. I really liked your take on that. So shout out to Michael
Thank you.
Talks About
Thank you.
Stuff, guys. If you haven't subscribed to Eldrick. Oh, this is going to be hard. Eldrick to my right and Michael to my left. I could do it that way. Make sure you do that and check out Michael Talks About Stuff's new videos because they are very cool. The one is new, and then you've got one about Jojen and his free will
Yeah.
too. So say hello,
Yeah.
Michael, and thank you.
Hey, I have not played Elden Ring, but I basically started making a Song of Ice and Fire theories and using clues that I've gathered from the books. A bunch of people who had played Elden Ring kept commenting, "Hey, this sounds really similar to something that happens in Elden Ring. You should check out this specific thing." And then I went and I had like a list, and then when I had time, I looked up all these specific things everyone was telling me to look up. I'm like, "Oh, hey, we're onto something here." So I tried to sort of learn the lore the best I could to piece together what George is trying to go at with the themes, and yeah, it led to a lot of interesting stuff, which should be fun to talk about today.
Well, I appreciate that. So you guys, you can see the level of effort. Okay, so Eldrick played the game. Okay, Michael did the research. I thought about playing the game and thought about doing the research and did neither. So thank you guys for saving my lazy, you know what. And in all seriousness, I do want to give these two credit, especially Eldrick, who put the initial outline together. So these two guys, here's the setup of this stream. I have no foreknowledge. I have not looked at the preparation. These two have prepared a whole presentation of these correlations, and they're basically going to blow my mind and your mind together. So I will serve as the proxy for your splattered brains here in the third floor of my house. And thank you for bearing with me for the late start. Streaming from a new part of the house, et cetera, et cetera. No one cares. So, well, I will just say this. You know, what is the Elden Ring? I've wondered. Is that? No, that's the Large Hadron Collider. That's not the Elden Ring. But is it perhaps? Oh, this is a different video game that's tangentially connected to this is Dark Souls, of course. So there's an eclipse ring up there. Does that have anything to do with this? No, it doesn't. But it's sort of similar. And then,
There's-
oh look,
there- yeah,
Euron's
there's enough
he's
that's
got an
close.
Elden Ring, and Leonard Nimoy on The Simpsons sees the Elden Ring. And I'll stop making eclipse jokes. But the point is that George Martin has been playing with Tolkien's One Ring in covert ways through symbolism. And then there's the whole idea of Lightbringer and the Fire of the Gods, which is conceptually the same. So kind of one of the themes of this stream that I think is going to come out real quickly is that what George Martin is doing, whether it's Ice and Fire or this video game, is he's drawing on classic mythical archetypes, as we always talk about. We're going to see stuff that looks like Bloodraven, but it's also going to look like Odin because Bloodraven is Odin, et cetera, et cetera. So at a certain point, George and other authors are kind of just saying, like, there's a guy under the magic tree. There always is. His name might be Godwyn or Bloodraven or Odin, but it's the same sort of thing. So we're going to do a lot of like, oh, that's similar to this mythology, as we're doing, oh, that's similar to Ice and Fire. And you're going to start to see that like none of this comes from nowhere. This is all a tradition of mythology and storytelling, etc.
I think.
Sorry, you go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, I think that's a perfect lead into a point that me and Eldrick talked about wanting to make. There's a lot of debate, like within the fandom of Elden Ring specifically, like what came from George R.R. Martin and what came from Miyazaki and the team that was already building games that covered a lot of these similar themes. And the thing that I think we kind of wanted to point out is Miyazaki specifically was a huge fan of George R.R. Martin and his previous work before A Song of Ice and Fire. So he was like a true super fan. And even before they worked together, they covered a lot of the same themes already. So it really is just a match made in heaven, where it makes it tough to tell what exactly did come from George at times. But we do have some good interviews and comments about what George worked on specifically. And like, it's tough to like, once you're actually looking at it in the game, piece out like, did this come from George exactly? We don't know, but the theming is so George that it's like, we're essentially, what we want to do is present a bunch of places where there's very similar themings, present to you as far as we can tell how much of it came from George, and then let you guys decide, do you feel like this is relevant enough theming wise, and do you feel like the themes and situations match up enough to learn something about A Song of Ice and Fire from what's happening in Elden Ring, or can we learn anything that may be happening in Elden Ring from A Song of Ice and Fire? Because the way I described it is sort of, they have a similar magical skeleton. Imagine Tyrion and the Mountain. They have the same skeleton, but one has dwarfism, one has gigantism. In Elden Ring, the magic is turned up, it's giant, it's out there. In A Song of Ice and Fire, it's in the background, it's toned down. But if you had both of those skeletons and each of them are missing half the bones, you can do some archaeology. You're like, okay, take this bone that's missing here, make it a bigger. That's what we're trying to do today.
Michael, I did not give you permission to cook this hard this early with metaphors and stuff. That was incredible. Two things. One, Maynard James Plum, Orange Tabby has a great idea for a poll question. How many of the people in the chat are gamers? Let's go with that first. And then after that, let's ask how many in the chat play Elden Ring. And if you don't play, vote in the poll and say no so that we can get an idea. That would be cool. Second thing, what I've been told is that George did the background of the game, like the world building backstory, but not the plot of the main game. However, the plot of the main game sort of grows out of the backstory. So we're going to continue to see some of the George ideas, quote unquote, as the game is played. But that's the official line, isn't it? Is that correct, Eldrick?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So because video game development changes so rapidly, I think Miyazaki said, if you can write the background, the history, the lore, the last 5,000 years that led up to this moment, we'll take it and run from there. And he's even said that he took George's heroic characters and sort of corrupted them and broke them down into these strange and horrific beings that they are now. Because this is myth turned up to 100. This is a Game of Thrones on a outer god and god level. This is what we're looking at here. And to give props to Miyazaki, he would be like the George R. Martin of the video game industry, where if you go back through Dark Souls and other things, we have dragons, we have trees, there's all the same sort of archetypal messages and parallels that we find just through myth that resonate with people, and George draws on. So does he. So I just want to give some props to Miyazaki at the same time. It was a collaborative effort at the forefront. They discussed the themes, the ideas. They come up with a lot of it together, and then George went away, wrote down a heap of lore prior, right up to what he describes as the shattering. And then after the shattering, sort of the game kicks off, and that's where Miyazaki and From Software take it on. But these are very much equals in the way they just write stories.
And there's always a shattering, isn't there? Like, if you've read David Eddings, there's a shattering of the world. And Tolkien sank Beleriand, right? Is that how it's said?
I'm not a Lord of the Rings
I think
expert,
it's Beleriand. Yeah, it's not Beleriand, the Black Dragon. Anyway, a bunch of Numenor sunk, Atlantis sunk. The old world is no more. It's just the thing. It's always how it is. Yeah. So yeah, there's something called the shattering. Let's go ahead and dive right into it here. So we've got images, guys. As you can see, we've got actual Elden Ring images, not jokes about the Hadron Collider. We've got all kinds of stuff. And some of it, frankly, just looks so much like Ice and Fire that it is startling. So
just visually,
we have
you can see
Night's Queen and the first Stark werewolf in beast form, or I'm just leafing through here like, is this Thoros of Myr in his final form, or is this like R'hllor himself? I don't know. The first Red Priest. There's a dragon burning a city, and then this one.
Yeah,
I'll let you guys explain this in the order that you've prepared. Are these approximately in the order of the outline, the pictures, or if not, you can just call them out and I can flip. But
yep, no, they should be in order.
I'll just say real quick, because Eldrick's going to take this over, I think, in a moment. Someone asked quickly in the chat, is this going to be spoilers? Yeah, there's going to be lots of spoilers for Elden Ring if you haven't played. And if we're doing our jobs right, there's going to be spoilers for A Dream of Spring. So,
and that's, thank you, Michael. Thank you. That is the goal here, is not only to go, wow, that's neat, George did that, but like the stuff that's in Elden Ring is stuff that gets at like the theories that the three of us make about the magic and the world building and the backstory and the weirwoodnet and what happened, what did Azor Ahai do, and all that crap. That's kind of, we're going to find some potential clues for that stuff, because we're going to see that so much of the world building is parallel. And people have noticed this about George's previous works, his short stories. He's developing a lot of the Ice and Fire ideas in infant form in these other short stories, like A Song for Laia, the names of the characters, some of the ideas, the others, the isolation on a remote place. There's all kinds of stuff. So yeah, George develops his ideas in a continuum. He doesn't start fresh every time. And so a lot of this stuff, Sean was, a hero with 1,000 voices was joking that George pretty much just hit copy paste on the deep lore of the books, thinking, well, no one figured this stuff out anyway. Because he doesn't watch our channels, he doesn't know that we're on to him.
Right, we got him right where we want him. And that's another good point too. I have seen like that criticism of people will either say, "Oh, George did nothing for this game," or they'll be like, "Oh my God, it's so classic George R. R. Martin. He clearly just copied and pasted all of his other works." And it's like, well, guys, it can't be both. But I was just gonna say too about that point. If you hire George R. R. Martin, especially with someone who covers similar themes and structures his story in a similar way already, like you're going to hire George R. R. Martin and say, hey, make something similar to what you've done in the past, right? Like you're not going to hire him to have him do something completely different than he's ever done. You want classic George R. R. Martin lore, and that's what they got. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, the squishers are excited, and thanks for your 26 months of support, Gavin. That's awesome, dude. Go away. There you go. Not you, Gavin. The little menu box. All right. So how's our poll doing? So yeah, most people are gamers. I would have to say that I am not. I used to be a gamer, like I used to play basketball. It's been been like over a decade and a half. You have to say used to, I think. So let's go on. Yeah, we'll see how the Elden Ring poll comes out. I bet it will be pretty strong, but we'll wait for Maynard Plum to drop that in the chat. So Eldrick, you're going to guide us through this thing here, but obviously we're all going to jump in. It'll be a feeding frenzy. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so I basically said a fair bit at the start. You know, they came together around 2017 to discuss the ideas and themes, and then he went away, wrote the lore, gave that to Miyazaki and his team, and they built on from there. And so what George has done prior to the start of the game has built almost a mythical version of the Game of Thrones, where we're playing. There's outer gods influencing the lands between, which is the place that this game occurs, and we see almost a Game of Thrones between gods. It's definitely just the same thing, just turned up to 11, and it's also concerned with A Song of Ice and Fire is definitely concerned within stagnation and the cycles of life and cycles of death and cycles of seasons, and this is also concerned with cycles, but more so cycles of eras and cycles of order, as like we see in myth. I think a reasonable comparison would be like Mesoamerican mythology, where we see the different eras of suns, like the fifth sun. That's the order of the fifth sun, and this is what we have. We have the order of the Erd tree. We have the order of the moon. We have all these different outer gods trying to influence the lands between through their chosen vessels to rule and have order over the lands between in the way they see order should be. And what we're going to see is some of it can't be taken literally. Some of it's a bit metaphysical. You're just going to have to sort of lean into it a little bit here and there. It's even just down to the concept that we're going to start with about the Elden Ring itself. It's not a physical ring. It's a series of runes that dictate the laws of the lands between, and that's it. That's it there. That's all all the runes combined together make the Elden Ring, and they sort of dictate the laws of reality within the lands between. So we have like a rune of death, a rune of the unborn, and all of these runes sort of provide order and the laws of reality. So you can straight away see this is high level, high fantasy myth stuff. You know what I mean? It's not a physical ring. We're talking about a metaphysical object of runes, you know? So, yeah.
Well, if you're going to have a magic tree and you're going to do that to somebody on the magic tree, then you got to have runes. That is, it is known.
That's right. Yeah.
What's the point otherwise? I mean, what are you powering if not your magical runes? Why are you doing it?
And so runes are great because they are symbols themselves, which function as keys to magic. So it's almost kind of fourth wall breaking when we're talking about symbolism in literature. But so the cycles, that's really cool. I often do like to call out the Mesoamerican mythology in Ice and Fire. It's a little bit slept on. George lives in the Southwest and is definitely influenced by it. And the cycle of the replacing suns is one of the best ones. And so it seems like that's an idea that's permeated fantasy. If you've read Terry Brooks, the Shannara series, there's a magic tree, and every 1,000 years a new elf has to go and become the tree because the old one's tired or whatever, you know, keep the demons in the forbidding and stuff. So yeah, this is love that. The cycles of rebirth. It's a great device to write about because all of our daily lives are based on cycles and transformations and rebirths and things. So it makes an easy way to create parallels and metaphors. Back to you, Eldrick.
Yeah, and that's why we see it played out in myth all across the world, across countless cultures. And From Software and Hidetaka Miyazaki being a Japanese-based company, they've drawn on Japanese mythology, which is the same thing, which is, and this is a big proponent in the Elden Ring community, is the Shintoism, where Shinto is like I could get this wrong, but sort of like a form of religion or form of worship in ancient Japan. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they have a philosophy about stagnation and flowing water. So that's what I wrote here. Japanese philosophy about the flowing water allows for health and growth and change, and it doesn't breed any sort of stagnate. As soon as water starts to stagnate, it becomes sickly. It becomes corrupt. It becomes poisonous. You start to get bugs it becomes hostile to our type of life, but it's a new type of order that could function, if that makes sense. So we have an outer god even in Elden Ring. It's the god of rot, and it would be hostile to our way of life, but there is life that would breed in that rot. So it would be a new order, just as it would be here. If there was stagnant water, it breeds life like mosquitoes and bugs, but it's hostile to our type of life. So I thought that was really interesting that Shintoism kept getting brought up. and it just shows that the cycle of change and the need for flow and stopping things and stagnating them just breeds corruption, and that's exactly what we see in A Song of Ice and Fire as well.
That's really cool philosophy there, yeah. Because in many ways, the definition of is something alive is it moving, at least on a cellular level. Like things that are alive move, unless it's a tardigrade in deep hibernation or something. But other than that, yeah. So I guess you could argue about seeds if you want, but they start moving once they're planted. So that's cool. And then also as far as decay and death, we know that's part of the cycle. We talked about this extensively in Ice and Fire. It's like, oh, nighttime, wintertime, death. They're not bad. They're part of the cycle. It's only bad when we get stuck, when we stop moving. Yeah. And that's what the others want to do. Freeze the river of time, winter forever, night forever, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's... you might be about to make the same point. I was just going to say this all leads in really well to what the shattering actually is, if I understand it correctly, right? Because these runes are all metaphysical parts of this entire cycle that is the order of the world. And what Marika does, and Eldrick can perhaps explain the reasoning behind it, or as far as we know a little better, she removes the rune of death from the Elden Ring. And this is something that we've talked about in A Song of Ice and Fire as well. Run into problems when you have these immortal beings. Bloodraven has removed death. The Weirwoods are able to remove death from those who are wed to the trees. Those in the House of the Undying have removed death from the cycle. And I think the point that George is making is that causes a ton of problems. Yeah. Now that's overly, like, it's hinted at in A Song of Ice and Fire where it's like setting up the problems, but we haven't been hit in the face with it yet. They're like, hey, slap in the face. Bran being strapped to a tree and living forever is not a good thing. That's not what we want. In Elden Ring, that process happened, thousands of years ago, and now you're dealing with all of the consequences of death being removed from the cycle so that these demigods can have their immortality or whatever it is, and all of the effects that that's had on the world and the way that it's causing this rot and this stagnation. And yeah, it's all because of that most natural desire to try and remove death from the equation.
Now, you guys said that we are lucky to have an Elden Ring streamer that's hanging out in our chat waiting to drop some pearls of wisdom. Who's that person? Let me call them out.
Jack is a Mimic. He was in the chat.
Yeah.
Cool.
A bit
well,
earlier.
If I see him, I'll look for his name popping up so I can...
Yeah,
sure.
Great YouTuber.
He also covers some good, he's read A Song of Ice and Fire and understands it and covers, parallels between specific characters and things like that. So, yeah, he's got some cool takes as well.
And his channel is called Jack is a Mimic?
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Cool. Right on. Very good. If
stuff.
one of my mods could track down the channel and drop the link in the chat, that would be cool. Always love to... Yeah, I'm sure he'll drop back in. That's all right. So here we go. Or if he's catching it on the rewatch, shout out and leave a comment if we missed anything. We're sure we missed... I don't know. The outline's pretty long. So yeah, tell us... remember, I know almost nothing about the game, as do 56% of our... Wow, 44% that answered the questions there. They have played Elden Ring. So we'll catch on quick. But yes, who's Marika and what does she shatter? What's going on here?
So I suppose the best place to begin is with the Greater Will. It's an outer god, and he sends a golden star down to the lands between. And on this golden star is the
God
Elden
Emperor.
Beast. Yep. And this Elden Beast is the Elden Ring at the same time. And that's that first image we've got there, David. That's the Elden Beast. You can sort of see the glowing gold that runs through him. And that's part of the Elden Ring. And I've already described what the Elden Ring does. It sort of dictates the laws of the lands between. And the Greater Will, having sent this golden star and this Elden Ring down to the lands between, they, whatever it is, sort of control the law of the lands between. They're sort of trying to have influence over the land. The Elden Ring then houses itself inside of an existing tree known as the Great Tree, and becomes sort of this golden tree you can see here, radiating down this golden light, which is referred to as grace. You'll see grace pop up all through this. It's the golden light that sort of gives people life. It's seen as holy. This tree's become sort of a point of worship. So it's basically an outer god influencing lands between through this magical tree that he sent down on a golden star. Whether that means a meteor, probably. But yeah, that's basically where we start.
Well, in fantasy, the entire point of meteors and comets being important is that they come from the stars. They're a piece of the heavens that's come to Earth. So that's it makes sense to put gods and beings attached to them, because that's part of the mystique, is that most people consider the stars to be the heavens or the realm of the gods or something like that. So when it's very exciting when they come down, and also dramatic and bright and loud and sometimes destructive. But so you're saying this is another form of that tree, kind of? This is the beast form?
That's another form of the Elden Ring, in a way. So the Elden Ring can sort of become this beast almost to defend itself, it seems. A lot of the lore of the game is also implied. So if we do get anything wrong...
I get like the vibe that it's like the Holy Trinity, right? Like it is the rune, it is the physical manifestation within Marika, and it is also this beast. Like the Elden Ring is many things metaphysically, but also one thing in that sort of way. Is that kind of okay.
Basically, yeah.
So,
and that's what I was talking about.
How do you
Marika,
say it?
Yeah.
Marika.
Okay, like America, but no
Yep.
All right.
Pretty much.
Correct. If I say stuff wrong, you got to correct me, or else I'll get 5,000 comments about it. So. All right.
But I sort of brought this to attention because it sort of reminds me very much of, I think it's one of your theories, David, about the consciousness or an entity coming to Westeros on a meteor and then perhaps inhabiting the weirwoods, which is exactly what we're seeing in Elden Ring. A consciousness from space lands on a meteor, takes over a tree, and then dictates the laws of life and death and the laws of reality within the land. So it's very much, it felt very much reminiscent of that theory.
So let's pause there. This is a couple things. This is both alien others, visitor others theory, but it's also just the Grey King myth. It's this Prometheus-like myth about the Grey King, who we know is involved with weirwoods. There's 1,000 clues about that, and it's the fire of the storm god that sets this tree ablaze, and that's how the Grey King possesses fire for mankind. So that'd be the fire of the gods coming down from heaven. It sets this tree on fire. So it sounds like there's a meteor strike, the weirwoodnet is altered, and then all of a sudden the human wizards can use it. And that seems to be the story. So then it just becomes a question of, did that meteor bring an intelligence or a sentience of some kind? So I think it's something that George is softly implying and isn't going to bring out into the fore. It's just a little idea that he's embedding in there. I see you guys both nodding. Yeah, just for kicks, kind of. It's very Lovecraftian, but not strictly Lovecraftian either.
No, and I feel like Elden Ring was his opportunity to take that idea and just run with it. Just like...
That makes sense. Right. Take things that are softly implied in the background and bring
I think he did a lot of
George.
That.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Are there squishers?
I don't know what the oceans are like in Elden Ring. I've never looked into that.
Watch out for the next update.
Yeah. That'll be the next one. They had the shadow of the Erd tree. What would be the shadow of the seaweed at that point?
And so basically there's this parallel. Azor Ahai invading the weirwoodnet. Azor Ahai is like the comet. He's like the meteor. He's like the fire. So him invading the weirwoodnet is kind of the same thing as the meteor striking the earth, because we see so much depictions of the meteor poisoning the earth, like at Ashai, on places like that. So there's that idea is just in parallel. Azor Ahai invading the weirwoodnet. It's this idea of corruption and invasion and someone sort of reforming something so that they can possess it and use it.
Yeah. And the other question I was going to ask too, that that grace that comes from the Erd tree, does it in game, does it grant you, like, does it help you level up? Does it give you blessings that are beneficial as you play type of thing? Or is it just more talked about as like, it's supposed to be beneficial to people who have it?
So it's basically a gameplay mechanic. So the sites of grace, if you've ever played Dark Souls, they used to have bonfires that you'd get to, and it was like a checkpoint, and you could save, refill your health until you got to the next one. And points of grace was your way to access that life.
Okay.
So if you
So
respawn at a point of grace. So it's almost like a gameplay mechanic as well. That grace gives life, and you also respawn at a grace point. You
yeah,
get runes. You get runes as you defeat enemies and use them to level up. And the runes are part of that grace aspect as well, because we have the Elden Ring itself is the great runes. Then you get
right.
So
So
it works as a gameplay mechanic at the same time. So
what that and the reason I ask is because it fits really well with how I sort of think the Weirwoods work, which is, you know, as you said, this outer entity or whatever's in the Weirwoods, this magical entity grants power to people, like it grants the grace to the people who are out there doing what it wants. But then you, by nature of having that grace, are able to subjugate those around you. You're more powerful than those around you, and you'll naturally do whatever the tree wants because that's what gives you the power. And it's the same situation in both. And that's exactly how feudalism works. The guy with the army, you follow him because now you're in the army and you're powerful. Well, they're building feudalism up a level, right? Like the feudal lords are now the servants of this magical entity that has them in a similar system of control. It's building all the way down. And Elden Ring seems to work pretty much the same way as far as I can tell.
yeah, it does. And if any of the races of people within the Lands Between are sort of outside the gift of grace, they're not sort of accepted by the Erd Tree. They're shunned. Yeah,
There's a America line about that, isn't there? Where she's like, one of the very like key things that she says is something about like, give yourself over to the grace of the Golden Order or wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart. And it's like, yes, that is distilled down what George is driving at with all these themes of magic. When this magical power exists, you have to give yourself over to it. If you don't, you are going to just wallow on the outside of society because all of these powerful people are gaining power through this entity, and they won't let you in. So you either give yourself over to this magical system, play by the game that it has created, or you don't play the game at all.
Gosh, this sounds like political commentary at this point. Working within the system in order to change the system. But that's kind of honestly a big part of what Brand's probably doing by becoming the last Green Seer. But Michael, you talked about that in your new video.
Yeah, who put all these politics in my books about dragons and politics? I don't understand. But that's basically the idea is when and this is the other point I was going to bring up too, when you have this character who is being granted grace by the Erd Tree. Well, it's really interesting then that at the end of the game, what you're doing, spoilers for the end of the game, you're overthrowing the order of the Erd Tree in most of the endings. Like, this tree is giving grace to an entity who has the ability to destroy it. And that's pretty weird, but I think it lines up pretty well with what Bran is doing because the Weirwood seem to be giving him his power, but I think there's a chance he's going to destroy this system and cycle forward into the new system. So that's the same thing here. And it's interesting to see that, like, no, the tree is giving grace to the that future Elden Lord of the new order, right? Like the future person who's going to overthrow its own order. Maybe this order wants to die.
Maybe the tree was planning it all along. Yeah.
And maybe this order will not die. It will recycle into its new form. And this is something that we're going to get into, I think, when we talk about the endings more. But I think in A Song of Ice and Fire and Elden Ring, like when you end the game in Elden Ring, to me, it feels ambiguous whether or not in certain different endings you have even replaced the tree, or if you've just put a different form of the same outer god in charge, right? Like they talk about the Faceless Men literally say this is what's happening in A Song of Ice and Fire. They say the red god, the old gods, they're the same thing. Many faces, one god. All the people are all just servants of the god. Well, if the tree is able to just play everyone against each other so that no matter who wins, it comes out on top, that might be what's going on in both of these as well. One of those places where people who really know the lore of these things should look for clues and try to figure out like how this works in one of the properties may influence how it's going to work in the other one.
Absolutely. Yep.
So tell me about this babe, Marika? She's
So
sleeping.
that's
She's in the tree. Is she Azor or High
that's
or
Mikola.
Nissa or both? What's going on here?
So that's Mikola.
Oh, that's
Marika
Mikola.
is yeah. So that's Marika there. So Marika. So I'll just start again. So we had the Elden Ring come down on a star, infected the tree. The tree goes gold. The Greater Will then needs to select a being who's known as an Empyrean to become the god on Earth, as in like basically like a representative on Earth, almost like a god Jesus sort of relationship there. And the Elden Ring houses itself within Queen Marika, and she becomes a god on Earth, and a religion sort of forms around her. We have the Golden Order form around her, and she then starts to act on behalf of the Greater Will to sort of take over the lands between as the Greater Will's avatar on Earth, which yeah, and there's so many parallels. Marika, even the name Marika, you can see it likely derives from like Mary, like the religious name. We even have Marika as we go through the timeline having sort of a miraculous conception births as well, and she's a god giving birth to demigods, and the whole story revolves basically around Marika, her family tree, and the Game of Thrones between those families and the outer gods that are trying to sort of influence the land between through these outer gods and demigods, gods and demigods. Sorry. So you can see Marika up the top left there. She's basically the center of the whole kit. Yeah.
Godfrey and Godwyn, huh?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because it's a very, I can see lots of George R. R. Martin naming conventions in the names of this, and he even got he got called out a little bit, saying you've hidden your name in all the characters of the game, because the golden lineage, that sort of timeline you're seeing there, they're all Godwyn, Godfrey, Godric, and then the next one over we have Radagon, Radan, Ranni, so it's to the far right. Sorry, David. We've got all the R naming conventions of Marika's children, and in the middle we've got her third sort of lot of kids. We've got Mikola, Melania, Mesmer, Melina. So all these names are G, R, and M. So he got called out saying, "You've hidden your name in the names of Elden Ring, GRM." So, and he said, "Why would I need to hide my name? It's on the front cover." He actually come out with a statement because it was so direct at him. But yeah. So this family tree,
Unfortunately,
everything.
I was just
Go
gonna say
ahead.
that's the one thing that we get him to comment on. Like we don't get him like to answer like, "Hey, what do you mean about this? What about that?" But everyone calls him out for hiding his own name, and he's got to be like, "No, I didn't."
Yeah, yeah. But you can definitely see the naming conventions as we see in A Song of Ice and Fire. You know, the Rainers, Rhaenyras, all the similar naming conventions, and they all sort of relate to which family they're
Is that
from, if that
Rickard?
makes sense. Rykard. Yes,
Rykard. Oh,
nearly.
excuse me.
Yeah, nearly. Yeah, but yeah.
Very good.
So
Carry on.
just to focus on Queen Marika herself as an Empyrean, Empyrean's actually a word that derives from a Catholic or Christian religion, and it's the name. I think it's in Dante's Inferno, but it's the name of the highest heaven that God resides in, and it's the name. I think Empyrean means like the fire within heaven. So just the word Empyrean being a heaven that God resides in, naming this being an Empyrean, which I would compare to a green seer, it's telling us that gods can reside in that person. So if you're an Empyrean, you can have a god come and reside within you, as if, the same way that an Empyrean heaven would have a god reside inside. And we can see the Christian and Catholic influence on Marika, even down to her name. It derives from Mary, and we even see her eventually strung up in a crucified pose within the Erd tree. So right there, she's sort of crucified on a rune within the tree, as a vessel for an outer god. So what I compared this almost to, the Empyreans are very much a green seer parallel character. If you're born as a green seer, we sort of implied that, you can access the trees and you can slip your consciousness into the trees and use them. But what if this works the other way and it's more of an Empyrean, and we can actually, now that you're a green seer, a god within the tree can access you, if that makes sense. So you can sort of see the parallel there between the Empyrean and the green seer, as in, maybe that's what Bran's going to become. I don't like to cite the show, but you could see that he almost had this entity or consciousness reside within him and become him. So Bran become the vessel for this consciousness within a tree, and now we have Marika here being a vessel for a consciousness within a tree that's an outer god trying to have influence on the lands between. So
can I ask you a question? You said that Marika removes the death rune.
Yes, halfway through the timeline, as we go through, she removes
that's further
it
on
for a reason.
So how is so it says a being whose physical form can be used to carry out the greater wills in the land between is selected to be Marika. So how does that happen?
So there's another there's things within Elden Ring called the Two Fingers. I didn't send you a picture, sorry, David, but I don't see many parallels to A Song of Ice and Fire, but it's definitely, there's a picture right there. It's definitely, it needs to be pointed out. So we have these beings that sort of literally just two massive fingers in the air that they sort of reside out of the ground, and we have finger reader crones, and these fingers sort of relay information from the greater will and interpret it, and they sort of, they are sort of a mushroom.
Wiggle. And
they wiggle.
Language is their wiggling. So you have to be able to read sign language from these two wiggling mushroom fingers.
Yeah, and we have finger reader crones, which interpret this wiggling and can relay information from the greater will. I didn't see a parallel to A Song of Ice and Fire in that, but that's probably necessary because the two fingers, they select the Empyrean that's going to be taken over by the greater will, if that makes sense. They tell the finger reader crones, they select Marika as their chosen Empyrean. So
that's such a good writer joke. Like the gods just wiggle their finger and everyone's like, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just enjoying that. That's funny.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the new symbolic lines I've been looking at is the idea of the hand and the hand of God, and the hand of God that reaches down and moves the pieces. Hands and fingers, for some reason, which I'm sort of trying to dive into, are very prevalent in both Elden Ring and A Song of Ice and Fire. Even down to, we see so many hand injuries, and we hear the hand of the king and the Order of the Green Hand and the Fiery Hand and all these. There's constantly, you've got Jamie losing hands, Theon losing parts of his hand.
I'm gonna have to cut you off right there.
We could go forever, but this idea of hands and fingers, there's something in it that George is trying to relay, and I think it is that hand of God idea that you said.
And the two fingers, there is also the three fingers, which is in a different place and are opposed.
And Chad, I want you to behave as best as you can. I'm not gonna do whichever you want.
And the three fingers are these three, and then the two fingers are these two, and they're separate. So it's implied that there is some sort of shattered, it's implied that maybe at one point they were one hand of God that is now broken and separated in some way.
Okay. So, it's really hard for me to be think that's right now. I am so sorry. I will just not say anything that's coming to my mind at all.
That,
but as you can see,
of that in these books, and
as you can see, having two giant fingers as the sort of interpreter of an outer god, this is not your normal story. This is high level myth stuff, high level fantasy,
it's very high level fantasy. That's just what I was thinking of. So I click, guys, if you're watching, I forget to say this, click the thumbs up on the stream if you're enjoying what we're doing here. It helps YouTube think that this is a good stream to show other people. So if you're here and you're having fun, just move your hand over to your mouse, move the mouse over to the little thumbs up, and click the little thing. Thank you. All right.
Oh, one thing I wanted to say too, that just quickly before we move on from Eldric's point about the Green Seers and the Empyreans, is another connection that I also made. And one thing that I would take potentially even further is Marika the Eternal at the beginning of the game. You don't know where she is. She's this main figure in lore, but it's like a big mystery because she's supposed to be this all-powerful god. Where is she? And then eventually you find her in this old, decrepit state, locked inside the world tree or the Erd tree, and she's like decaying and barely hanging on and wants to die, seemingly. So she set up this whole system that's been in place for 10,000 years, and it's her descendants who are the Empyreans. That makes her, to me, sound a lot like Bran the Builder, who built a bunch of stuff with magical weirwoods, seemingly laid the foundations for this entire society, and then disappeared. Well,
That's
when
not
we
her,
see
is
all
it?
No, that's Fia. No.
Okay, sorry.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's Godwyn in the roots. There's lots of people in the roots.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's
These are the
it's very
motherly
heavy
roots.
on that. And so like when we see essentially Bran finds those bodies down in the roots, as we're talking about here, that they're strapped there, sustained to life, it's sort of really well implied to me that Bran the Builder, if he would have wed himself to the trees, he would still be alive in a decrepit state, probably down in the crypts of Winterfell, if or under the wall somewhere at one of the two main Weirwood magical locations. So I compared him to Marika the Eternal because then he's the one who laid the foundations. The descendants are green seers. And when I was doing my research for the video, I was looking up for hints that maybe Bran the Builder was still alive, and I found a forum post by none other than David from years ago, where he's just like, hey, George made this weird comment about how like some figure from the Age of Heroes is no more likely to be alive than Bran the Builder or the Night King, or the Night King's no more likely to be alive than Bran the Builder or Lan the Clever. And you pointed out, like, it's probably not the case that we're supposed to think Bran the Builder is still alive, but maybe. And you were just kind of joking, but I'm sitting here like, it is actually maybe George is making that joke. Like, yeah, Bran the Builder is still alive, strapped down in the roots somewhere. And
there is specifically
how it
a mechanism for him to be alive in some form. So, yeah.
Right. And so when you see it in Elden Ring and then you see the mechanism fully laid out, but we haven't been slapped in the face with it yet, it's just like, this is one of those situations where I look for, I'm like, okay, we're missing part of it here in this property, but we have it on full display in this other property. Is it going to be the same situation? Are we going to find Bran the Builder wanting to die deep down below the crypts of Winterfell? And that would explain why Bloodraven can't do whatever it is that needs to be done, because he's not a Stark. He's not descended from the line the way these Empyreans need to be to replace Marika. So that's why he needs Bran. So yeah. That's Marika, Bran the Builder, Bran, maybe the new Empyrean, kind of is the vibe I got.
It makes sense to me. I do think, yeah. I mean, we go back and forth about, was Azor Ahai or Night's Queen? Who was the Stark? Who was the Great Empire of the Dawn person? Hard to say.
Yeah.
But it's certainly...
whoever that was, yeah.
It's no question that Bran being a Stark is, pretty important. So go ahead, Eldrick. Where are we here?
Yeah, I was just discussing it, or down to probably A Song of Ice and Fire, just the comparison between the Empyrean and the Green Sea, or potentially the idea of an Empyrean being a vessel that's tied to the body sort of thing. The Green Sea could become a vessel as well, and that seems to potentially be what's happened with Bloodraven and with Bran. And just reiterating the fact that George really draws on myth, this is a very clear Odin draw as well, because Marika, as we see her pinned in the Erd tree there, which happens sort of later in the story, she's imprisoned within the tree and she's sort of lost half her face. So she's got one eye again. So we've got that Odin symbol. She's pinned to the tree. She's got the spear through her, like a red spear you can see there through her side. So it's very much a Jesus influence, an Odin influence. He's just drawing on all these different myths and religions to create his own mythology, which is exactly what he's done within A Song of Ice and Fire. So you can definitely see the parallels between the three. But I think the next thing to bring up about the Empyreans is all Empyreans are granted a Shadowbound wolf as their vassal and protector. So if we're comparing Green Seers, and that's we have Ranni there, she's another Empyrean, and her Shadowbound wolf is Blythe, and that is Marika, and her Shadowbound wolf is Malekith of the Black Blade.
Are they called Shadowbound?
Yeah, Shadowbound
Yes,
wolves. Yeah,
wolves,
they're literally
specifically
part. Yeah,
wolves. David, this
they're,
How
this
does it work?
bloodline has magical wolf pets. Yeah, yeah.
we don't know how it works. A lot of that stuff, the exact specifics of it is never laid out.
That's
We
okay.
have a line. I've got some quotes. So, according to the old legends, the wolves are the shadows of the Empyrean. So they are their shadow. So if we're thinking on a mythical level, they're a part of their being. They're even
So
in, if you think of a Song of Ice and Fire, how Melisandre can draw shadows out. It's almost as if this wolf, they're a physical being, but they are very much a part of their shadow.
it
If
feels
that,
very much exactly like I think Shadow Babies work in A Song of Ice and Fire. Like when I looked into how Shadowbound beasts work, you have these magical beings that literally like cast part of their consciousness, part of their energy out, and it becomes a new being. So Marika has a shadow that exists out in the world to do actions for her, because she's strapped up in this tree, so she needs some being out there doing things, and that's exactly how I kind of think the others work. Is they're the beings out there doing the things that are the will of these bodies strapped to the trees, which is probably just the will of the trees. So it really does seem pretty directly like the Shadowbound beasts are working in a similar way to whatever's going on in A Song of Ice and Fire. Like,
And then, of course, you
one of
have
the
your
really
model.
cool.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you
go
got your
ahead.
Green Seer King model where, someone like Bloodraven or whoever is controlling the beasts and things in the war from a cave
Yes,
somewhere.
exactly. Yeah.
Just like a drone
Like a-
operator, but more or less.
like a Bran in the crypts where he's got Summer out, scoping out Winterfell after the burning, and
Yep.
same stuff. Marika's
You're-
trapped within the tree as an Empyrean, being influenced by a god, and she's got this shadowbound wolf out in the world doing things. And it's interesting, I was looking up through A Song of Ice and Fire, and we constantly see the dire wolves referred to as their shadows as well. They're constantly referred to as shadows.
Yeah.
And the shadow of Bran's shadow, he was his shadow. And so
And the others are shadows, and they're like
Mm.
wolves, and Ghost is John's shadow, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep,
What's
yep.
Malekith of the Black Blade? What's the Black Blade part of this wolf? Why does the wolf have Black Blade in its name?
So he has a giant black sword, and later in the timeline,
Who does?
Malekith. You can see it on the left there. It's sort of standing upright. Yeah, that's his black. That's the Black Blade. His
the
Black
wolf
Blade.
could swing a sword.
Yeah, he can sort of stand. They're sort of not.
That's scarier. Yeah,
They're half wolves. They're werewolfy beasts, right?
Okay.
They're
Like,
sort of wolf
wolfish.
beings.
Yeah.
If you go to Ranni's picture, you can see Blade, her shadowbound wolf.
Oh,
he's sort
of
of
he's carrying the
humanoid.
sword right there. Duh. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that Black Blade, as we go through the story, Marika takes the Rune of Death and gives it to Malekith to keep in his sword. So his sword contains the Rune of Death, and it's the only way you can kill a god is with that Rune of Death. As soon as that Rune of Death is removed from the Elden Ring, the laws of death disappear from the lands between, and she becomes Queen Marika the Eternal because she can't die. There's the concept of death has been removed because the Elden Ring dictates the laws of the lands between, if that makes sense.
That's cool.
So,
that's a cool story just on its own.
And that is the shattering,
Yeah.
right? That is the shattering. That is like the right.
I thought she removed the Rune of Death during the shattering, and this is the community aspect of Elden Ring, is that it's so vague that nothing's set in stone. We can sort of discuss it. I thought it was at the shattering that the Rune of Death was removed, but it was actually during the Godskin Apostasy that she removed it, because they were out killing the gods, and we'll go through this, but she was trying to stop the death of the gods, because obviously she's a god and it's going to impact her rule. So after she put down the Godskin Apostasy, she hid that Rune of Death away so that the gods couldn't die anymore.
I was just thinking about the fantasy traditions of black swords. It's usually the cursed weapon is the general thing. I've made the case that I think original Lightbringer is the first black sword. It's made from the Bloodstone Emperor's black meteor. So it's the fire of the gods, but it's, tainted. So it seems to be more of the same.
There's an important event, right, called the Night of Black Knives, which uses literally obsidian daggers, basically like we see in A Song of Ice and Fire for magical purposes, right? Weren't they trying to kill gods with obsidian daggers, basically? Or was that something else?
It's not obsidian, but it is. Okay. There is a black blade infused with the Rune of Death to be able to kill a god, and that's what we're seeing just there. And we'll get to that in the timeline. But yeah, that's that rune of death. Without that, death doesn't exist. So,
and of course, shout out to your namesake, Eldrick, Eldrick of Melnibone, or Elric of Melnibone, rather. His black sword is a rune sword. It has runes in it, and inside of it is some sort of dragon spirit or something. It's kind of vague. I don't want to get too specific, but yeah, this is an old idea. Go ahead, though. Where were the wolves?
Yeah, the Shadowbound wolves. Yeah, and so we're Empyreans with their Shadowbound wolves, Green Seers in particular, probably the Stark line with their wolves as wargs. We can see the parallels straight away. They've got ties to the trees. And once again, going back to the myth that he likes to draw on, once again, we've got Odin with his one eye and his two sort of, I wouldn't say shadowbound beasts, but he's got Gary and Freki as his wolves that sort of, I think they scout for him as well.
Yeah, and so does Hunan and Munin. They're all, that's where all the Ice and Fire, this is where it comes from. It's wolves and ravens, And this art here is by Andrew Levkovsky. And in case you're wondering, some of the Elden Ring pictures we're showing are from the game. Some of it is art. The artist's name is at the top of the screen on most of these, but yeah, they are thought and memory of the names of Hunan and Munin. I can't say those today. I'm sorry. I just don't have it. But thought and memory. So these are like, these are manifestations of Odin's mind. And I'm not sure what the wolves represent exactly. I think their names mean like ravenous and something else. So they represent his warlike aspect, I would say. Yeah.
And that's what the Empyreans use their Shadowbound wolves for, is to protect them or carry out deeds for them in, not, I wouldn't say war potentially, but Malekith put down the Godskin Apostasy as well. So she uses them as a vessel for war too. So that makes a lot of sense.
And as we're talking about the Godskins, they just scream Boltons. Like, the Boltons would try to flay and wear the skins of Starks, and the Godskins are targeting this magical bloodline that we're talking about that represents the Elden Ring version of the Starks. They're trying to kill them and skin them to gain their powers. It's very similar.
Well, there's proof for my specific Bolton theory. Not just the Bolton, but the idea that the Boltons used to skin Starks to steal their skin changing ability. Yep, so what's up with this? Is this neck? Where are we here?
Yeah, it's a little bit further down the line. I've put the timeline together.
Michael's trying to mess up your timeline, Eldrick.
On the screen, I feel like that was a fair pull.
It's okay. The enthusiasm is important here. So, but yeah, Eldrick, correct. Where are we going next?
So we're sticking with the Empyreans and the like Marika. So if you've heard anything from me, I don't stop talking about people in trees that have been turned to stone, and we see exactly the same thing within Elden Ring again. So after the shattering, Marika's strapped inside the tree, and by the time the main point of the game is to go collect the runes of the Elden Ring and mend the rune together and sort of bring back the Order of the Erd tree. That's what it's related to. We can choose different endings, but that's how it's related to in the start. And when we get to the very end of the game, we get to Marika within the tree, and she's become a statue. She's this stone being in the tree, strapped to the tree. She's eternal, and she comes to life. There's a little bit of a spoiler, but we have to fight her/him, them, this stone being at the end. And then after we beat them, the Elden Ring sort of comes out of Marika, becomes the Elden Beast, and we have to defeat the Elden Beast. That's the final boss of the game. So
that sounds hard. That's exactly what we're talking about with the whole Grey King petrification theory, is that Grey King's mythology is telling us what we'll find on the lowest levels of the crypts. Green Seers who have turned gray, who have turned to stone after 1,000 years. And again, the Blackgate Weirwood face looks as if someone who's lived for 1,000 years but never died. That's exactly what Grey King did. So this is very good corroboration for, I think this is something we all agree on basically at this point, right? Like the lowest levels of the crypts will have petrified Green Seers of some kind, right?
Strapped to life like Marika,
Definitely feels that way, yeah, for sure.
And that this is the first statues that the later statues are essentially just kind of mimicking these original statues. Bloodraven, a grizzly talking statue, says Bran. So
exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
cool. All our theories are right. Make sure you subscribe to our channels. Watch our videos.
That's what every time I look into Elden Ring, that's pretty much what I gather. I'm like, oh, we're on to it. Like this branch of theory crafting is correct. Like,
well, we have had 12 years to peel this stuff apart without any distractions.
Well,
distractions like a new book. So we should have figured out something. Thanks to everyone in the chat, by the way. Lots of friends: Ion, Elizabeth, Orange Tabby, Northern Tommy, all my mods. Thanks, guys. Hope we're having fun. This is definitely long awaited here. So, all right, back to Eldrick.
So we've discussed Queen Marika. Now we're going to sort of go through the timeline of her character. Because she's been influenced by the greater will that's inside of her, the Elden Ring, she then sort of begins a conquest of the lands between, killing out all the different races that sort of oppose the Erd Tree and oppose her order, and just goes through and just wipes the slate of anyone that disagrees with her. And we only find this out as we go through the game. Sort of in the game,
fascist sounding.
It is. It very much is. And I think that's the point of the game. In the end, is we think that we're doing this amazing task of fixing the Elden Ring and bringing back the order of the greater will and the Erd Tree. And as you go through, you speak to all these characters and you think, what are we actually fixing here? like this Marika's done some horrible things, like
America has. That's true. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this isn't a politics stream. Never mind. Go ahead.
But I think one of the big questions that is unanswered.
Hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but is this very thinly veiled metaphor here? America's done some awful things.
I mean,
it could be.
There is a giant world order that yeah. I mean, it might.
I can't be the first person to point this out.
Right. We don't know how intended it was, but
it's more of a religious war in the game. So it's more of her religion, and her city forms around her god-like entity, her tree, and we have the Golden Order and Langdell sort of form around the base of the tree, and it's almost a religious war. If you are against our religion, we're just either assimilating you or wiping you from the earth.
Yeah. I said, obvious political commentary.
Me and David, I thought we were going to make the same joke. We're like, yeah, depending on who you ask, Manifest Destiny, that other America is a religious war too. But,
Okay, well, there it is. Sorry, Eldrick, go ahead. I thought that was worth
worth a mention. Yeah. If you could go to the family tree, David, that'd be awesome, man. I was just going to go through Marika. She then takes on what's known as a king consort, which is Godfrey onto the left there. So Godfrey becomes her king consort and the first Elden Lord. No, Placidusax was the first Elden. So he is an Elden Lord. He becomes a king consort. They form the Golden Lineage, and they have 3 kids. They have Morgott, Moog, which are the cursed Omen twins to the left there. And then we have Godwyn, which was the golden child. Godwyn the Golden. He was sort of seen as the figurehead for the Golden Order in a way, because he was so pure. The Omen twins were seen as sort of they're shunned because they're born different. Omens are born with like horns protruding out of their bodies, and they are generally seen as part of the old order, which we won't really get into, but the horns that sort of protrude from their skin, if anyone else is born outside of a royal family, they have those horns just cut off, and the child, trigger warning, is just left to die because it's seen as different and not a part of the Erd Tree and not a part of grace. Yeah,
like
and
so I've born in certain places in Ice and Fire with the gifts that are not appreciated in certain spots. They're left to die.
Yep, great comparison. I drew a comparison to Tyrion because the Omen twins are then, because they're royal, they don't have their horns cut off and killed. They just sort of left, and they hid down in the sewers just to exist. It's just out of the, we don't want to show you that there's imperfections within our line of blood.
So what do these horns mean?
So they are... they're drawn from the Crucible. So the Crucible was almost the old Elden Ring, and the old ways, everyone had horns and feathers and things. It's almost an allegory for the old, like prior to humanity arising, when all life sort of come from one place, and it's sort of seen as primitive, I guess you could say. It's like primitive to the Golden Order.
Sounds
and
like
it's
a
not
good party.
So
is the previous age. I'm sure it's a matter of perspective. I'm sure those
The
horn
fairy
beings liked
age
it a
or
lot.
something, kind of. Yeah, okay.
yeah, so they're seen as not aligned with the Erd Tree and the Golden Order, so they're hidden down in the sewers and not killed because they're royalty, which is why I draw a comparison to Tyrion, because dwarves in the Song of Ice and Fire generally they're seen as like just horrible creatures, and generally if they're not royalty, they can be drowned or killed or thrown down a well.
Is this a totally different thing?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, he's hidden, and Tyrion was sent down into the sewers, just like Moog and Morgott was, to just clean the sewers down in is it Castle Rock, isn't it? Yeah. So there's even that being shunned, like
and he
that
comes out of the sewers to kill Tywin, and Cersei's like, he's in the walls.
True.
He lives down there,
Yeah, yep. And that's what we have. These two, the Omen twins, are sent down into the sewers because they're seen as not a part of the Golden Order and not perfect. Whereas Godwyn the Golden, as you can sort of derive from the name, is this golden child, and the forefront, the figurehead. This is our perfect child. Whereas the two Omen twins, we hide them in the sewers, but we don't kill them because they're royalty, and we don't do that.
It's very Tyrion-ish, but those horns means they're throwbacks, is what it means.
Yep.
And so I'm sure that has powers or significance too, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, they end up, one of them. So Morgott tries his hardest to be accepted by the Golden Order and fight on behalf of the Erd Tree, but Moog, he embraces his shunnedness and meets an outer god down in the sewers called the Formless Mother, and she's like a god of blood, and she derives power from wounds and rot and decay, and he then sort of goes against the Golden Order in a way because of how he was treated, I think, in a way, and tries to bring about almost an age of blood. So we have all these outer gods trying to influence these demigods to bring about their age, and Moog's trying to bring about like an age of blood. It almost seems that the Formless Mother's trying to influence him to create. Yeah.
The Formless Mother. That's cool. So now we're getting into chaos philosophy. That's obviously the great darkness, the womb tomb, Kali. And of course, that is where creation comes from. This is really good.
Yeah, it hits all the themes that like I'm sure everyone that was begging you to look into this for so long was just like, David's gonna love this.
David's gonna love this. The Formless Mother. That's exactly his. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So Morgott. So Moog is bitter, but Morgott is not. Morgoth.
Yeah, he
shall
tries.
We say?
Yeah, he tries to basically enforce the laws of the Erd Tree and protect the Erd Tree and bring about the Golden Order yet again, sort of thing. Even though he was shunned. So yeah.
And where does his initiative come from? Is he working on behalf of the previous order because he's got the horns and he's a throwback? So what's he trying to do?
No, it's almost like he's trying to have acceptance by the Golden Order by fighting on their behalf and trying to protect the Erd Tree and protect.
That's never going to work, Morgott. They're never going to accept you.
No, but it's that commentary on
the one child who is shunned burns down the village to feel its warmth. And then the other way you can go with that is you'll spend your whole life trying to gain the acceptance. You're going to go one way or the other, so maybe you just don't shun the kid in the first place is the idea, right?
I feel like I'm a Morgott instead of a Moog. Okay, all right, let's go.
It was Snapshot McLovin in the chat. Morgott loved the Erd Tree and the Golden Order, and despite not being loved back, his great rune being the centerpiece denotes him as the true Lord of Langdale. Yes, because he was really trying to become the next Elden Lord and sort of promote the Order of the Erd Tree yet again, even though they disliked him so much. It's definitely a commentary on being left out on the outskirts, and whether you crave acceptance or whether you crave revenge. It can go both ways.
And a lot of these outer gods to sort of play the role of like thought patterns is another connection I made. So like you embrace the chaos if you're shunned, and that's going to lead you down a dark path because you have that thought pattern. Whereas it's like, how much of it is the influence of the outer god? How much of it is the influence of the actual individual making a choice? And yeah, it's interesting in this world with magic, whereas in our world we're kind of left to be like, well, that sort of happens in real life too. You have people who have these dark ideas that go on to influence them. Where does that come from? I think that's what in this world it comes from an outer god.
Yeah, right. And just as in, like, where I was thinking about this morning, of course, classic question: where do gods come from? They come from inside our minds, but more specifically, they come from our needs. Like we need parents, we need avatars, we need things, we need these forces, we need things explained, and so we come up with these forms. They're just externalization. Well, not just, but they are, I think, in their sort of initial form, the idea of gods, they are manifestations of ideas and concepts.
Exactly.
And so
ideas exist on an existential, like, outer plane level in real life. Like, we're accessing that plane when we think, and like to the extent that like there's a godly force in this world, ideas are like on the top of the list of one of the things that can influence people in godlike ways. So
and so that makes sense. And so we see the deities here, on a certain level, they represent different philosophies, different modes of being. Like you were saying,
love is a god. You embrace the idea of love, and you fall down a path, right? Like,
Yeah, and Moog craving that acceptance because his mother, Marika, straight away, we're talking about Marika doing horrible things, straight away, she's cast her children down into the sewers, and he's found another mother. He's found the formless mother, a god of blood, almost like a revenge.
Surrogate.
It's like, that revenge sort of, he craves blood, It's,
I get that. I get the Team Moog. Hashtag Team Moog. I see that in the chat. So I'll carry on, Eldrick. This is interesting. This is really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think a good point to make now is that sometimes we won't find things that directly tell us where Elden Ring's A Song of Ice and Fire is going, but you can see where all this, you can just see George's style all over this in drawing on mythology and drawing on real life events. And it's just interesting to talk about, So she establishes the Golden Order. She has her children, and then they establish the royal city Landale. That's the one around the Erd Tree, and that's their royal. It's called Landale Royal Capital.
Oh, you can see the tree in the upper right.
Yes, okay. It's a massive tree. It is enormous. So they build that around.
This looks like the broken capital. Looks like something bad happened. The bridge is missing some spans there.
Yeah, so that's a bridge to a divine tower. And so when we enter the game, this is what it looks like. And the whole land is broken and blighted, and it's just a ruined city. There's even a great YouTuber called Tarnished Archaeologist who actually does archaeology in-game, looking at the different structures and looking at the different symbols on all their buildings. And you can sort of connect who built what and where they were at the time. That's one of the best Elden Ring
pretend archaeology about a fictional universe. That's dumb. Watch my Sothorios video. Okay. All right.
And it very much reminds me of what you do to David. You'd love Tarnished Archaeologist because he actually put out a new video recently about the Shadow of the Erd Tree where he's found stone boats, which there was an ancient bearded man using to protect himself from a great flood. And just brings to mind the Grey King and his, weirwood stone boat.
Oh,
It's but that's deep. That's deep lore. One thing that's probably one thing I haven't mentioned yet is Shadow of the Erd Tree came out about 3-4 months ago, and I finished it. The lore is very. I think there's more questions than answers, so I'm still understanding it. I can bring parts of it up as we go. But I think even the community itself still trying to decipher Shadow of the Erd Tree itself. So if you've played the game and you've played Shadow of the Erd Tree, and you're wondering why I'm not discussing that too much, I'm still deciphering the lore of the DLC.
I'm going to expose how little I know about games. Is that the next game, or is it like a update pack, or
an update pack basically? Yeah, so DLC, downloadable content. So they've released the main game in 2022, and then in the last few months they released, it's like an add-on, an expansion pack, the old expansion packs you used to get, and it's a whole new area of the game. There's new bosses, new weapons, new stuff to so still deciphering it. I just thought I'd bring that up while I remembered.
Yeah, one thing I was going to bring up that it might be something you were about to go into because of the picture on the screen there at Lindell. Tarnished Archaeologist, one of the videos I remember watching from him, is he shows that there's a point you can stand in the capital city when you're looking at this giant golden glowing tree, and you can see the bark of the old great tree there, and it pretty heavily implies that on some level or another, this giant golden tree we see is either an illusion, or it's not physically there, or it's at the very least doesn't physically look as beautiful as it appears to the people as they see it.
Yeah, that's true.
So David will love that, I think, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, at the base of the Erd Tree, you're right. The entrance to the Erd Tree where you go and sort of fight Marika, you can see where the gold stops. The normal bark is underneath. And when you actually stand in certain spots on the map, you can actually see through the Erd Tree.
Yeah,
it's clear. You can see the cliffs. So the Erd Tree is it's an illusion, which is bizarre because, and that brings you back to the shadow of the Erd Tree, because when we go into the Shadowlands, we see this tree with this veil draped over the top of it. You can see the veil. There you go. That black veil that's been draped over the tree. The fact that the Erd Tree is an illusion and you can see through it, and then when we go to this is called the Shadow Tree. You can see a veil over the top of it. So it's almost like there's something hidden underneath the Erd Tree. The Erd Tree the Erd Tree probably looks like this, but it doesn't. That doesn't look nice. So they've got this golden illusion of a tree.
It's very likely a corrupt old tree that used to be the great tree, that used to be the order, and that's why I figured David would love that. And then someone pointed out in the chat there that it seems to be on some level an object of faith, and they point out you see the Erd Tree in the distance, which would imply that some people can't see it glowing brightly in the distance because they don't believe in it. So I don't know if that if the shadow of the Erd Tree added to
bring that up. Yeah, he said like there's a NPC that says that's almost implies that some people can't see it, the Erd Tree, which is a bit bizarre. I need to dive a bit further into that. But you can even see just there being golden and glowing. It's an illusion. It's very strange.
So this reminds me of like the Undying, obviously, and Melisandre, and
that's
characters like that. It's the general idea of things not being what they seem.
And the Undying appearing as like kings and ancient beings, and then the veil drops and they're actually decaying and dying, and that's exactly what is. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yep.
So somebody in the chat is saying that the Shadow Tree is actually two trees and one is strangling the other.
I've heard that interpretation, is that like
could be
because the Shadow Tree is something that's like in the same place as the golden tree, right? They're just not always the same. Like it looks that way sometimes and looks the other way some other times, right? Or am I wrong about that? Or are these different trees?
Oh, so we're getting into Elden Ring theory here.
A little
bit. A lot of this
I probably should say
that. A lot of what we're saying, we should probably clarify, is like, it's like a Song of Ice and Fire, right? Where it's like 60% of the community feels very firmly this is the way it is, and 40% says that they're all idiots. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, and this is why I sort of prefaced it with, we're still understanding the lore of the Shadow of the Erd Tree, because it literally says that the Shadow Tree is the shadow of the Erd Tree. Now, what does that mean? You know what I mean? It definitely brings to mind the weirwoods and the shade trees, because
and the whole everything being the shadow beings of the original being, and the Jungian shadow. Shout out to Tool.
Yes. Yeah, I have to bring up the Jungian shadow at some point in this. That feels like that is part of what he's getting at here, of like overcoming the shadow, and the shadow is a part of you that you have to be in control of if you want to put out your power into the world.
Yeah.
Michael coming with this hardcore philosophy there. That's very true. That is well said. You've read the Tool lyrics, Michael. Oh, my mic is okay. Yeah, hang on one second. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
So the Shadowlands that we travel to, where we find the Shadow Tree is the shadow of the Erd Tree, but the lands itself they used to be a part of the Lands Between, but have been removed from the Lands Between. There's almost like this veil is concealing these lands from the Lands Between, and we can only travel there through. Oh, we'll get down that later. But,
okay, well, that's interesting because, of course, there's a lot of veil symbolism with like the realm of the others and the realm of the dead. We find in the Vale of Arryn all this symbolism about the wall and how the wall is like veil, or like you think of the Vale of Tears. They talk about looking through the Vale of Tears. That means on the other side of death, and the wall is like a frozen river or frozen veil. So there's a lot of veil symbolism, and it has to do usually with the barrier between the other realm and the normal realm. It seems to be the same here.
It does, yeah. And it seems like George has just taken that concept and just gone to 100 on it, because there's literally a veil draped over a tree that separates these lands from the other land. So
George loves his literal, like he'll take something literal, but then he'll make it just twisted so it's still magical, but it's also just like, okay, George, that's just directly the name that you gave it. What are you doing,
I could see the pitch meeting. So we're gonna there's like we're gonna drape the veil over the tree. He's like, is that like no, literally like a curtain.
It's metaphor, but we're literally doing it too. Yeah.
It reminds me of, I used to garden the California tomatoes, and every once in a while you get some really bad pests, and there are these things called spider mites, and they will make tents over your buds and leaves, and it's kind of like that. It's very gives me the heebie-jeebies. So you don't want spider mites. You basically have to burn your whole garden down. Go ahead.
You don't want to burn your garden down at that early stage of growing it. That's terrible.
Burn, burn, burn. Sorry.
The burning is probably the best segue, because Lanedale, the royal capital that we had just on the screen before, that Marika sort of built around the Erd Tree. When we want to change the order and access the Erd Tree, we have to burn the Erd Tree. And when it burns, the city below becomes known as Lanedale Ashen Capital, and it becomes an uninhabitable city covered in ash, and it's it's the largest city, a capital city, covered in ash, and it's uninhabitable, and it's a Shire. To me, I just see a Shire straight away, an uninhabitable city.
Sorry, I'll try to do better, but yes, that's just okay.
Yeah.
So it's the largest city in the world. It's uninhabitable. It's covered in ash. Of course, a Shire, oily black stone. The river Ash runs through it. It is shadowed, and it was destroyed by the meteor, according to me. So how was this good town of Lendell destroyed?
So to gain access to the Erd Tree, to get in there to mend the Elden Ring, we have to burn it. So we have to set fire to the tree to allow access in to the tree.
Just like the Grey King. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So it's just...
So the first burning of the tree destroyed the city?
It did. So when we first get to Langdale in game, you see a little bit of ash around the city. So you can tell, tarnished archaeologists yet again, just exploring the city, come to the conclusion that this has been burnt in the past, because there's still ash everywhere. And even in the houses within the city, we have like a golden wax that's put around all the doors and windows to stop that ash getting in, which tarnished archaeologists pointed out is a direct parallel to real world I can't remember which volcano, but there was examples of this being done in real world history as well, as like sealing the doors and things like that, just to stop that ash coming into the house. But
Also
yeah,
has a lot of that seal of God, like the Passover type of, like, if you have this magical seal
yeah,
over your doorway in your house, you're protected from the damage, but if you don't, you're not. Yeah.
good point. Good point. Yeah, so yeah, it just brought to mind a Shire, and then the shade trees, which look burnt in a way. Yeah, it's just a lot of parallels being this uninhabitable city. So
There's a couple different directions we could take this, but also, isn't there a city that's basically like a city of the moon? That was the one that really reminded me of Ashai that I feel like David would like, because there's this old moon that used to be in the sky that is either destroyed or darkened, but there's this city that is supposedly built from the pieces of the fallen moon, if I remember correctly, and it's all like this dark magical stone, and all these people worship the dark moon, and it feels like if the oily blackstone in Ashai is built from the fallen moon, then there's a one-to-one parallel in Elden Ring, and it's that city. That was the vibe I got.
yeah, and we'll get to that a little bit further down, where it's Nokron. So there's two eternal cities beneath.
Hold your
the
horses, Michael. He says.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, I'm sure we'll get there eventually. There's a couple different directions to go, but
I'm like,
it's a
ruined
very good
Ash
point.
City, Moon Meteor City.
yeah, I'm like, I could keep talking about this one. I could bring up the thing that I know David's
So
gonna love
is
to
the
hear
ash
about.
poisonous or anything, like just inconvenient?
It just becomes uninhabitable because the whole city gets covered in ash, as in that you can't. So what used to be big sort of roadways and buildings, it's just covered. So now you just get there and it's just this ashen wasteland. It's just you're walking on top of the buildings because there's so much ash. It's completely covered.
Cool. Very good.
So it becomes uninhabitable because of that reason.
It just kind of sucks. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it does. Yep. But yes, also Michael, very, very true about and it's Nokron and Nokstella. They're two eternal cities beneath the ground. They got banished beneath ground, and they worship the black moon. So there's 3 moons in the story, and we don't know much about the black moon, but it did shatter, and they worship it. They build thrones out of it. They do all sorts of stuff.
It's like a perfect explanation for the oily black stone or whatever in Ashai being the moon. It's like it fits that so well. It's just in the wrong property.
Dark moon, not black moon. Somebody's saying.
So the dark moon is Ranni's moon. So we've got Rennala has the full moon, Ranni has the dark moon, and the Nox used to worship the black moon.
Which is different than the dark moon.
Because
you would know.
There's one quote that proves that the black moon was broken, and I'll go find it.
That's the level we're at here, David. Is like it's like there's one quote that one guy says in this one. It's like, if the theories where people base this off of one thing Bloodraven said that one time, that now we're like 90% sure that this is how it works.
Right.
But it's that.
Okay. Duly noted.
So we find a talisman called the Moon of Nokstella, and Nokstella is this eternal city beneath the earth, and it's a talisman that represents the lost black moon. The Moon of Nokstella was the guide of countless stars, and it's said to be a fragment of the black moon that once hung above the eternal city. So that implies that it once hung above the city, but now it doesn't, and they're making talismans out of this pieces of this moon. So that implies that it broke.
One follows the other,
So
you can't build things out of the moon if it's not broken.
That may be the purpose of breaking the moon in either story, is to be able to make cool swords and stuff and cities. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I think if the world tree that we see, or the Erd tree, or the weirwoods in A Song of Ice and Fire, if they're currently a corrupted, like, giant magical natural force, it would make sense that in the past someone corrupted the moon to gain their power. And, maybe it was 10,000 years ago in Ashai that they did that, and now you've lived with it for so long that all you see is this city with no children and crazy magic going on, and they've forgotten how it even got there.
I see why you mentioned Greyways Tim a couple weeks ago, Eldrick.
Yeah, very Lovecraft. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet someone in the chat has got to put the moon back, and it's like that might be a thing that happens in the end of A Song of Ice and Fire as
I've
well.
wondered
Like, I'm
about
not
that.
sure.
Is there a way to eject all the oily black stone off of the earth
Yeah,
somehow? That
or
would
make
be
a new
good,
moon.
but
Yeah,
I'm not sure how.
yeah, I don't know either. But
And that's one of
it'd
the
be pretty
endings.
metal if that if a
Very
shy
metal.
lifts off, like Bran like puts his fingers to his ear,
It
opens
was
his
a
third eye,
spaceship.
shoots into the
Damn
sky,
it!
explodes, starts orbiting the Earth again. Yeah.
Well, I have wondered if the second moon that cracked and, birthed the dragons and caused a long night, it may not be totally kaput. It could be dark out there somewhere. There's even a line, you talk about one line. There's a line where George talks about the moon was a black hole in the sky in Bran's last chapter. And like the thing about that is you think, oh, well, that's a new moon. The new moon you can't actually see, though. You don't ever see it as a silhouette in the sky. So what he's describing is not something that you actually see. The only time you see a new moon is during a solar eclipse. Is because the new moon is basically right under the sun. So you don't see it because the sun blots it out. It's a day moon. Because think about it. The day moon is always a thin crescent because it's near the sun. No, I'm sorry. That's wrong. I'm freelancing.
I get very
I'm freelancing
confused.
astronomy. Think about a day moon that is a crescent. And then the crescent gets so small that it disappears. That's when the moon is literally in the same alignment as the sun, and so you can't see it. So the moon is never a black silhouette that blots out the stars, but Martin describes it as such in that chapter. So it's either sloppy poetic astronomy or there actually is a black moon out there somewhere.
That's just visible sometimes. Yeah, that would.
It's an interesting line because the moon that broke above Noxtella is the black moon. It's so.
In one of the endings, when you side with Ranni the witch, she brings back the moon at the end. Like she starts a 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the stars, or under the wisdom of the moon. It's called the Age of the Stars. So
that sounds good to me. I'd vote for that.
It's described as a cold, chill night as well.
Yeah, it's a long night. Yeah. She's the one who looks like the Night Queen. She brings a 1,000-year chill night, and she kicks out the old outer gods. Seemingly, like that's her goal, is to eject them as far into space as she can by like strapping them to herself somehow and ejecting her. Is that right? Or she straps them to something and ejects them into space, I'm pretty sure. And then
that's cool.
severs
Minty Maelstrom says she's suspicious of day moons. I agree, Minty. It's not right. It's not right.
To be there.
Tain't right. Okay. Sends the gold back to its source. Yeah. Back to where you came from and don't come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is she doing up there working after her shift, not getting overtime? I agree.
That's why Marika wanted out. She wasn't getting paid overtime anymore by the Golden Order, and she's just like, all right, after 10,000 years, I'm done.
Gotcha.
All right, so we're gonna. Is it Fire Giant wartime?
Yeah. So we've got Marika. She's the representative, the god on Earth. She establishes a city around the Erd Tree with her first line of her family, and then begins the religious war to take over everything that they see as a threat on the Lands Between. And the first war that's implied is the war with the Fire Giants. And the Fire Giants live up in the mountains, and they worship an outer god known as the Fell God. And he's also the one-eyed god. And that's what you can see his representation there in the giant's
he's
chest.
Got a chest eye.
Yeah, so that I'm pretty sure that chest eye is the Fell God that exists within the Fire Giants. So the outer gods tend to exist within beings and influence them in there. And so they kill off the Fire Giants because they see their fire as a threat to the Erd Tree. The fire can burn the tree. So they begin this religious war to basically destroy them. But the Fell God is the representation of the Fell God is one singular red eye, which brings to mind like Bloodraven's sigil straight away. Bloodraven's sigil, Euron's sigil, that one fiery eye, and it's got 9 pupils, and Euron was one of 9 children, and it's just you can just see it straight there. Like he's a god of fire. We don't know much about this Fell God, but they're a god of fire, and they exist within the Fire Giants.
So one of the really I was gonna say one of the really cool things that I think I noticed about like this fire god is this magical fire is the only fire that is magically powerful enough to destroy the Erd tree, if I'm remembering correctly,
Yep,
basically.
correct.
But at the same time, they are not able to fully destroy this flame because this god-like entity exists within this giant. So if they kill it, he's going to go somewhere else. So what they have to do is, and you maybe were just about to get into this, they have to trap one of these living fire giants still alive. They have to kill all of them but one, leave him alive, and force him to eternally guard this flame. And I think that's such a cool bit of world building because the way we were talking about outer gods as ideas, this flame in a lot of ways represents like the flame of revolt, the fire of change and revolution. And when you're trying to build this controlling giant order, you can never fully stomp out that flame of revolution. If you're violently killing the revolution against your controlling order, it's going to spring up somewhere else. So what you need to do is you need to pacify it in a sustainable, eternal way to keep that fire of revolution eternally burning, but on the low. And that's literally built into the way that he handles it in the world building, which I think is really cool.
Well,
Very
I
well
thank
said.
you for, again, teasing out the clear political commentary here, Michael. Just
It's there. It is there.
art imitates life, imitates art.
Yep.
But I think one of the main parallels you'll find with this war with the fire giants is the forces of the Erd Tree, they go to war, but they employ the Knights of Zamor, who live in the consecrated snowfields. And these are tall, gaunt, quick, icy beings.
Yeah, this is the part where I just lost my composure going through the pictures that you sent me before the stream. I was like, hey there, buddy. Like the she, but like icy she.
Pretty
elegant, ethereal, an alien form of life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they've been the sort of opposition, the eternal enemy of the fire giants since time immemorial. They wear knights. So I've just got a few quotes. We've got armor worn by the Knights of Zamor. They were hailed as heroes in the wars against the giants. They're long-lived warriors clad in biting, freezing winds. And they have in apparent devotion to winter. Their swords are even styled in an icy wind. You can see that sword there's like meant to represent an icy wind, and they have frost magic and icy magic. And so the team of the Erd Tree teams up with the icy beings to fight against the fiery beings.
It's all right
there. Yeah. So that's exactly right. And I sort of draw the parallel back to, potentially the children of the forest creating the others. I'm not sure if that's what happened, but maybe.
Some version of
to
that,
fight against the fiery first men who were coming with fire. That was their main issue, was they're burning the trees, which
and
is
someone
the
in the chat,
Eldrick
was saying that the sun was hit by a meteor. One of the pieces of that meteor was an eternally burning piece worshipped and tended by the giants. What's that now?
That would make. I haven't heard that, but the giant eternally tends a flame. So if that flame is like a meteor that passed through the sun, was set on fire, and crashed to Earth, that would make sense. I didn't know that, but that's what they're probably referring to. The one living giant.
McLevin, if you have the winds are. Oh, it's a different comment. Yeah, I guess like you said, some of this is theoretical, right?
Yeah. I'll look. I might have a look into that while we're talking.
He says it's clearly a meteorite cult.
That could be one of those things where it's a theory, but he's saying it's clearly this. But like that.
Oh yeah, no, that's how he's saying it.
It might clearly be like, that would make sense. Like that's really cool. But yeah, he is eternally guarding that flame. And, when you burn the Erd Tree, you need to go defeat him so that you can get access to the flame to use it. If I'm remembering correctly.
And that kind of that fits with the idea that like, the black sword is the only thing that can kill a god. It's like this is all magic from the stars that can be used to do this stuff. So that kind of fits, yeah.
Oh, and the one other thing that since we're talking about like the magic used to actually burn the thing, the other thing that I realized, wait a minute, I just told my computer might do something weird in a minute. I just had a pop-up that said you will be signed out. But if I crash, I'll be back. Don't worry. the Shireen thing that I explained to Eldrick, and he can take over if I crash completely. There's a kindling maiden in Elden Ring called Melina, who is an innocent maiden who half of her face is marked by a gray mark, and you literally have to sacrifice her and
There he goes.
The crash that was promised.
I can take it. I can take it. So yeah, So Melina, she's the fire maiden, a kindling maiden, and she needs to sort of burn herself, set herself alight to burn the Erd tree. So in order for that to happen, she needs to sort of sacrifice herself and catch a light to burn the Erd tree, gain that access to the Erd tree. And I think me and Michael were talking about whether that drew a direct parallel back to Shireen. I know he drew that conclusion.
Well, and Melisandre too.
And Mel, yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So it's that burning of a maiden to access the power within the trees, essentially, is what Michael was getting at. And yeah, that grey mark that's on the side of Melina's face, I think he's referring to the grayscale that we see on Shireen. It's a very similar thing yet again. And
seems like it.
We see Shireen probably potentially being involved in Jon's resurrection, who's coming out of this symbolic weirwood. We might even see the burning of Ghost, who is a symbolic weirwood in a way as well. So burning trees, kindling maidens, you can see all the connections that, it's pretty good stuff.
That is good stuff. And we'll wait for Michael to join us back. Probably got to restart the computer or something dumb like that.
Yeah, he had some really good points on that connection. But yeah.
So yeah, these are the others are partnering with the sacred tree people. Yeah, this is interesting. Also reminiscent of Robert with Ned fighting against the Targaryens. Okay, forces. Yeah, that's right. I always forget that that basic Game of Thrones story is still the archetypal struggle,
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, just
like the Targaryens replacing the Gardeners as kings of Westeros. It's the same thing.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Let's try Michael. He just called in. Michael?
Oh,
is that you?
Hello?
There you are.
Yeah.
Oh, we need the mustache, buddy.
I'm coming back. I restarted my computer this morning to specifically avoid this, so it would install anything it needed to, and apparently that didn't work. So I'm back. Hopefully Eldrick was able to pick up. I was like, oh no, I'm about to crash.
No, he didn't. He lost his ability to form coherent sentences and completely broke down. It was awful.
Darn it.
Thank God you're back.
Did you get to the end of Shireen is going to be burned to destroy?
Yes, we did. We
did. But you made some excellent points in your videos and stuff, so I thought I wanted to carry on with a bit of that. But
if
she also brings the player back to life, and that would confirm that would be the Jon role. The player can marry Ranni as a consort, and she builds a new order as a new god. Also, Ranni.
Player can marry Ranni as a consort. She builds a new order as a new god. Yes, that's one of the options you can take at the end. One of the optional endings is to become Ranni's consort. Yep.
Yeah. I know Jon's not going to be happy about all the things that were killed to bring him back. No, he will not. Yeah.
It's going to tear him apart to that his life came at a cost that he was not comfortable with. Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
Oh, before we move on from the fire giants, I just think it's also really cool how in Norse mythology, part of the Ragnarok cycle is ice and fire meeting, and they meet in the process of rebirth for the world. And when we see the history of this world in Elden Ring, this current age was formed after a war between ice and fire, the fire giants and this icy side of the war. Same thing happens, then the new age begins. It's the Ragnarok cycle partially there as well.
Now, does anybody know what this image is about? This is Dark Souls, but this would appear to be werewolf shadow thing going on here.
Yes. I would love to know more about the Dark Souls lore. If I had to learn any more, I'd have to push out a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire and Elden Ring. It's already, my brain's pretty full.
Because isn't there a George connection to Dark Souls?
Well, Well, so that's the thing that me and Eldrick talked about this a little bit in the prep for this. Is it's genuinely tough to say sometimes because like there's sometimes where something screams George R. R. Martin. It's like, oh, this royal family has shadows that are literally wolves as their companions. And then like if you go back, if that is from the previous Dark Souls, it's like, well, then that was in the lore of the adjacent game before they even brought George in. So it's like, well, both of them are drawing heavily on Norse mythology and heavily on similar things in the
That's probably
first
the
place. So
answer.
it's tough to
That's probably the
say.
answer.
It's tough to say what comes from what, but at the same time, you're inviting George into this playpen to play with these things that you have anyway. So it's like it just because it existed in the previous thing doesn't mean George isn't doing something with it. But just because it screams George R. R. Martin doesn't necessarily mean it's George either. So it's tough to say. That's why we're doing archaeology, basically.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, I definitely do. I mean, I've been using Dark Souls artwork for Azor Ahai for years. I mean, it's just too good.
Yeah,
so
it works. Yeah.
I'm curious to learn more about that game sometime too. There was a good comment here. Will Robb Stark return to life as a Shadowbound wolf? No, but he probably died twice. And everything that Rob does is foreshadowing for John. I'm going to do a stream sometime soon doing all the Robb Stark stuff and showing how it's a foreshadowing for John. I talked about this before in a stream called The King of Winter, but there's more there that I want to go back to. And also Rob is cool. So yeah, no, Rob died twice. He's done now. Thankfully, he doesn't need to die again, but just no promises how many times John could die. I mean, he's going to be otherized and then fire transformed, and God knows what.
The fun in theory that I might cover at one point about John that Elden Ring kind of made me feel could be stronger. When Alistair Thorne, when John dies, I can't remember if he says the same line in the books, or when he dies, he says, "Now I rest, but you'll be fighting their battles forever." If Jon Snow was like this fire giant that's on the screen right here, if there is some sort of like weirwood connection that must remain alive somewhere, there's a lot of things that would fit really well if John's fate was to be banished north of the wall forever, carrying a little piece of the old weirwood magic in him so that it can't like disappear the same way that this fire giant is forever tending the flame. John could be forever banished to keep the rest of the world safe from this giant power that was so influential and went into him.
Like it makes me think of the Isle of Faces too.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. A place to kind of keep this godly power where it's sort of separated away. And like that could be why John went north at the end of the show. And because it's like that was so emotionally flat. But if he was going north under that circumstances of like being banished to the north to forever tend the flame of the old ways so it doesn't come back, that's a much more like if you imagine that's what was happening, right? It makes those scenes hit harder.
And that's why they have to keep Dawn at Starfall, because that's the original sword of the King of Winter, and you don't want it anywhere near the north because that's bad.
That could be too. That's a good call. Yeah. I like that.
Okay, so the Knights of Zamor defeat the fire giants. The others win, and everyone likes that. Oh, this is a messed up world.
It is. And the Knights of Zamor are hailed as heroes because their order of life sort of doesn't contradict the golden order of the Erd Tree. So they're just left on their own, and then the consecrated snowfields have been taken over by the Golden Order, essentially. So now we move on to the next war. And she just strategically goes through the lands between just killing off or assimilating race after race after race. And
it reminds me of, too, how there used to be the Storm God and there used to be the Drown God, and it seems like the old gods solidified that order. They don't really worship the Storm God anymore, but there are stories about it before Storm's End. The Storm God actually had power and was doing things, but they defeated it. And there seems to have also been an old gods consolidation of power era around the Weirwood trees in the same way there's the consolidation around the Golden Order and the Erd Tree. So
yeah, because there would have been first man culture religions that we just see potentially disappear and or just convert to this weirwood religion that potentially stayed in the world.
And the names, even the Storm Lord, fits so well with that. Like if it was George like writing this ancient world history, which it seems like he was in charge of, he's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna reference the sort of similar thing, right? Like we have the Storm God defeated, now you have the war with the Storm Lord, you have Ice and Fire in there too. He's just in the background, he's throwing all of his stuff in there. And I think
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to that next war that we find with the Storm Lord. It's on Storm Hill, and you're going to see, essentially we don't know much about this. It's very, very, there's not a lot of detail about the Storm Lord and what happened, but it's a castle that's built on an eternally stormy hill.
Is there a picture of this?
No, I didn't have one, Dave. Sorry, mate.
Okay.
There's nothing
Sorry.
too important. But so the Storm Lord is suggested as having been a storm hawk, like a literally a hawk. And Godfrey and the Erdtree take over this, kill off the Storm Lord, and build their own castle there. That Godfrey builds his castle there, and that becomes his castle. And they're just slowly consolidating power. I just wanted to bring up and see if anyone else had any ideas that this Stormhawk, we also see this hawk idea attached to Stannis, who was at Storm's End, and he had his hawk. So I wasn't sure why we were seeing this hawks around eternally stormy places, and I just wanted to touch base with you guys, see if you had any ideas, but I couldn't find anything. But yeah,
that stood out to me as soon as you said hawk. I thought of the Stannis story, and to me, maybe it is just George hinting to us, the Song of Ice and Fire fans, even harder, like, hey, this is a reference sort of to the Stormlands, the Storm God. Like, I've got not only the same name, not only did it serve the same role in the history of being wiped out as this order took power, but I'm going to throw the hawk imagery there as well. And this is something I was thinking about these last couple days, knowing we were coming into this. This is a theory that I would like to make a video about, but it only makes sense about 2 hours deep into a conversation about why Elden Ring is similar to A Song of Ice and Fire. Do you think that Storm's End, in this context, could be built to contain the Storm God? Like, trapped underground in a very similar way? Like, the wards and the magical whatever was built at that castle aren't keeping the Storm God out. They're keeping him in and trapped under there.
Well,
so that the old
think
gods can take power.
Michael, if I could jump in, I think the answer is yes, but it's not the Storm God, it's the others. The castles are built around the God's Woods to contain the others, and part of the giving the blood to the weirwood trees is maintaining the seals of the Dark One's prison, quote unquote.
I think that the Crypts of Winterfell especially makes sense for that, but I'm just thinking of, like, could it be a case where, like, that's what's going on, the others are working under there, but, like, the specific reason that Bran the Builder wanted to go help at Storm's End is because, hey, we got to trap this other rival god somewhere. Like, we got to trap him with our magic to keep him there. Like, I don't think that'll ever be revealed or whatever, but, like, looking into Elden Ring and, like, looking at what may have happened in the past, I'm kind of sitting there wondering, like, do they got a storm god, like, trapped down there and, like, the weirwood magic is penning him in? I don't know.
Well, but symbolically, they are the Storm Lords. Like, they triumph over the Storm God, and now they have the power of the storm, and they have thunder hammers and things.
Is he being used as the battery for their magical thing against his own will? Maybe.
I think it's just a thematic idea, and the real manifestation is more what we were talking about with the weirwoods. But yeah, I mean, it's implied though. Like I said, they are the Storm Lords.
I don't know if it would ever be a thing that would ever come up in any way. But it's like one of those things where I'm like, oh, that's an interesting conversation that we'll probably not know an answer to. But that's how
the others.
I was going to say, even Elden Ring is set up the same way, where we don't know the answers to a lot of these on purpose. We want these discussions to be had in both of these properties on purpose, I think. But go ahead.
I was just going to point out that lightning and thunder and storms, it's kind of like the others version of fire. There's a lot of lightning symbolism with them and thunderbolts and things. And lightning is blue, obviously, so it kind of works for the fire of the others. But okay, go ahead, Eldrick.
That was about it for the Storm Lord. Eternally stormy castle being built after, the taking over the lands, which is essentially what might have happened with Bran the Builder. And the Hawk connection, the whole speech Stannis has about his hawk, it feels relevant in the story, and I'm not sure what George is trying to tell. And I just noticed this connection over to Elden Ring, and I thought I'd bring it up. But
Well, he's talking about different religions. When he's talking about trying a different hawk, he's talking about embracing Valorism because
yeah, that makes a lot of
point.
sense actually. Like that is thematically hitting right on that point.
Yeah, and that's what's happening here. We're essentially killing off the old ways and bringing in the new. Yep, makes a lot of sense. So the next war was with the ancient dragons. So the ancient dragons, we have two types of dragons in Elden Ring. We have the modern dragons that look like the ones in A Song of Ice and Fire, the sort of biologically correct ones that George is always banging on about, with their arms are the wings. Whereas the ancient dragons within Elden Ring, they're four-limbed beings. So they are almost a godly figure. They're not a natural being. They're almost...
That's so funny. George has taken this bloody thing, this little pet peeve that he's been banging on about for 20 years, and he's like, actually, this is world building now.
Yeah.
But I think, and I need to look into this, but I think Dark Souls, they have ancient dragons in Dark Souls as well, and they are four-limbed beings that have always existed before time.
They're
immemorial.
Unnatural.
And
4 limbs, unnatural. It's actually 6 because the wings are limbs, so it's 6, and that's okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
But so yeah, the ancient dragons, they now reside in a place called Farum Azula, which is a floating temple in the sky. And originally it was named the Storm Eyrie, which is interesting because we have the Eyrie in A Song of Ice and Fire, which resides up in the sky. Just thought I'd mention that.
And also the dragons come from the moon, which floats in the sky. So that's kind of similar.
Yeah.
The moon is a city. Don't keeps going sci-fi. It's not supposed to go sci-fi.
But yeah, so
magically
the floating.
Dragons, it doesn't have thrusters or anti-gravity devices. It's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's what this... So Farum Azula is rumored to be floating in the sky because it was hit by a meteor. And the meteors bring down like gravity magic. And the gravity... You can see it in-game when we kill off Radagon. A meteor hits the ground and we can go to the crater to enter the eternal cities beneath the earth. And you can see the bits of rock floating in the sky because the meteor's got this gravitational power to it. And that's why they reckon Farum Azula's floating, is because this meteor hit it and it's controlling the gravity around it. It's pretty high myth. So the ancient dragons, they have stone skin. They have this stone, they're covered in stone scales, and they can be eternal because they petrify. But these stone scales can also twist and bend time. So we actually, in Farum Azula, there's an optional 3-headed dragon that we have to fight called Placidusax. One of the heads has been cut off, and the other two, one of the heads is male, the other one's female. And it reminded me of Tyrion, thinking of the 3 heads that he had, and the third head would give birth to the last. Some interesting stuff there. But yeah, the ancient dragons attacked Leyndell, and essentially what happened, Godwyn the Golden befriended Fortisax, one of the ancient dragons, and sort of assimilated the ancient dragons to come underneath the rule of the Erd Tree, and they formed the ancient dragon cult, which sort of, the dragons taught the Erd Tree their magic, and they sort of worked together to form this ancient dragon cult of the Erd Tree, essentially. So they sort of coexisted. They didn't get wiped out. They're ancient dragons. You're going to really struggle to do that. I mean, look at the size of him. But they sort of assimilated in the end, and became sort of friends. But there was a few parallels across the Song of Ice and Fire, even just in the naming conventions. Some of the ancient dragons' names are Grandsax, Fortisax, Placidusax, Lanciax, and then we go through to Song of Ice and Fire. You got Arax, Syrax, Terrax, Urax, Vermax. You can see this similar naming convention. And yeah, they're all stone scaled, which can preserve them through time, which brings to mind Danny's eggs. we've got these stone eggs, which this stone, returns to life. It's just some more parallels between the two. There's also another. So I did a live stream with Amanda from the Disputed Lands when House of the Dragon was on, and we were talking about the new opening cutscene that they put for House of the Dragon with the tapestry. And there's that one scene at the start where they have that dragon sphinx with the head, and there's almost a ritual going on, and it looks like one of them's holding a heart or something like that.
The bowl of blood, it looked to me.
Yeah.
There's some glass candles.
Yeah, and so Amanda brought up that she thought it might have been or looked like a heart because she'd seen this symbolism of like consuming hearts. And I brought up the fact that in Elden Ring, this is exactly what you can do. You can consume dragon hearts after you defeat them and take their powers on. But the more you consume, and if you consume too many, you essentially become this dragon-like being. You basically become a dragon. And so we got talking. I think she's doing a video coming out soon about dragons, so I won't dance around it too much. But we wondered whether the consumption of hearts had something to do with becoming the dragon in A Song of Ice and Fire as well. We see Dany consuming a horse heart and then giving birth to a dragon baby. And you can see that the idea of just consuming the heart in general to take forward powers, we see that with Hagen as well, like Varamir consumes Hagen's heart to take on his power. It's probably a very archetypal idea, is to consume the soul, and the soul is thought to reside in the heart a lot of the time too, and to consume that, to take that power on. It's, once again, we see that in Elden Ring, and we wonder whether potentially that consumption of the heart had something to do with becoming the dragon in A Song of Ice and Fire too, maybe. But just thought it was an interesting parallel across.
Yeah, for sure. I don't feel like I have anything to add, but yeah, the idea of eating the heart definitely fits really well with just how George handles his magic, like perfect sacrificial, like passing of magical energy. So,
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the horse heart, but obviously you did. And that's generally the magical principle behind cannibalism, quote unquote, is absorbing some sort of power. So that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Cannibalism is very simple, honestly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't think that one through too much, yeah.
And then, of course, you eat the heart tree. You eat the weirwood paste, to get power. So,
yep. So the next war is with the Godskin Apostasy, which they sort of become this uprising led by, we don't know much about them once again, but they're an uprising led by an Empyrean known as the Glowmide Queen. We don't really know who the Glowmide Queen is. It's suspected she might be Melina from one of the cutscenes. She opens her closed eye at the very end, and it looks sort of gloam colored. Gloam is another word for like dusk. It's like the dusk-eyed queen she's also referred to every now and again. And she led the Godskin Apostasy. And what they do, they kill and skin the gods and then wear the skins of the gods to sort of end the era of the Erd Tree once again. They are opposed to the Erd Tree. They try and kill off all the gods, and I assume sort of start their own order. It's never really described too much, but they use Black Flame, which draws on the Rune of Death for power. And so once Marika sees this as a threat, sends Malekith to put the Godskin Apostasy down, this revolution down, and then plucks the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, gives it to Malekith to keep, and then that removes the concept of death from the Lands Between, because these wanted the death of the gods. Mm-hmm. So if we remove that Rune of Death, their Black Flame that they use to kill the gods has no power left. Like, as in, it can't kill the gods anymore. The gods become eternal. Queen Marika becomes Queen Marika the Eternal.
Right.
And but very clear parallels off to the Faceless Men and the Boltons, the flaying these are flaying gods, and potentially drawing the power from the skin of the god that they're wearing. I'm not sure if it's a direct call out because it's character design, but on their robes, the front of their robes, there's 7 faces, and that's the faces of the god that they're wearing, if that makes sense. So they're wearing the skins of gods to take power and put down and they're also worshipping death, and they're sort of trying to bring about the death of gods, which is exactly what the faceless men, they sort of worship a god of death in the same fashion. So I thought it was really interesting. So we fight the Godskin nobles and the Godskin Apostles. This is a Godskin Apostle you're seeing here, and the Godskin nobles use a weapon called a Godskin Stitcher, and it's like a needle, and they use that needle to like stitch the skin of the gods into like a coat, essentially, to wear the skins with this Godskin Stitcher. And it just brings to mind Arya, who's wearing skins. She's got a sword named Needle, and needles are for stitching. Yeah, I didn't know if it was. Yeah, it's
She'll
just
be
an
sewing
interesting.
all through the winter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which of course is a little bit of a reference to the Norns, but weaving faith and stuff like that. That's cool.
But not much more to draw parallels directly, other than just we can see this skeleton and just the parallels between what George is doing. That just looks like a Ghibli Lynx piece of art right there.
It really does. Yeah.
So
there's not even. Not a lot to say there. It's the skin flaying thing, but it's applied to killing gods. But again, the idea is that it's a way to steal power.
Yeah, and wear the power of the gods, like wear it on you. Exactly right.
The other thing that this whole kind of era that we're talking about in the history, where it's the age of the Erd Tree being born by defeating all of these old competing other gods that used to have power, that kind of goes to show us that like this used to be the new. Like this is a cycle, and in the cycle there was a time where the old ways were the new ways. And maybe they were defeating old ways that used to be worse, but over time the old ways grow into the controlling thing that needs to be taken out by something new. And the whole cycle is visualized there. And yeah, we're at the beginning of it here.
And that's almost what they were trying to do, was start that cycle again, is to kill off Marika and the gods, to stop that and start their new age, which I think in my last video, the many-faced gods, I brought up Zipe Totec, which is a Mesoamerican myth where the wearing of skin was symbolically suggestive of bringing about the new season, and the germinating corn beneath the earth could come out again. And that's what Mesoamerican rituals would be. They'd skin people alive and then sort of wear their skins in rituals to bring about the new season. So it's very much stripping of the old, like a snake, stripping of the old skin to give way to the new. It's that cycles and rebirth in the wearing of skins yet again. Are you muted, dude?
At the risk of judging mythologies, a lot of religions have taken things that are supposed to be symbolic too literally.
Yes. Perfect example is skinning people alive and wearing them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's certainly not limited to Mesoamerican, like Mayan and Aztec mythology and stuff. We all, in America, I've talked about my upbringing with conservative Christianity, and it's mostly that, just like taking things that are supposed to be metaphors and taking them literally. It's not, that's how you get dogma, et cetera, et cetera. Let's not go there, but yeah. So, okay. So where we are now, the banishment of the Nox. So we're at 2 hours here. I see that I'm on page 18 of 52, Eldrick.
Yeah,
I saw the same thing in the outline when I first read. I'm like, this is a lot of pages. I feel like this would be hard to get through.
Yeah, we could probably skip through to like.
Should we make choices here? Yeah.
Yeah. So we could probably go through to Rhea Lucaria, Oh, actually, there's some good stuff in there. I'll just quickly go through this. So the Nox, it's Latin for night, and they're a race that was Newman. They're a cold-blooded race of people. They worship this lost black moon, and they invoked the ire of the greater will and were banished underground by Marika. They are waiting for their Lord of Night to return to usher in an age of stars. And the Japanese translation for this Lord of Night is Night's King, right? So we have this, we can see some parallels coming through. They're trying to create artificial life out of silver tears to recreate this Lord of Night. And that's why they were sort of shunned by the Erd Tree, because artificial life doesn't have the approval of the grace through it. So it's very much an alchemical thing, and you'll see alchemy pop up a bit more with the golden order, with the gold sun, light versus silver moon night, and we see this right through to the Academy of Raya Lucaria, which is it's like a Hogwarts basically within Elden Ring, where they teach sorceries and they draw magic from glintstone, which is very much a parallel to obsidian or dragon glass. Glintstone is said to contain the amber of the cosmos, and it's the vitality of the stars resides within it. They can use that to draw power from, and there's a way, it's called prime. You can create primal glintstone, which contains the soul of a sorcerer. You can use a sorcerer would slice open their own heart with this glintstone, and their soul would then enter into the stone and reside within that stone.
Okay, so that's the Lightbringer myth with Nissa Nissa going into the sword, and it's also potentially glass candles can, store consciousness of gemstone empress.
Yes, yep. And it brought to mind, Michael, you looked into the drafts, George's drafts in a certain library, and there was talk of him. He had removed a part.
So glass candles in one of the unused versions of the drafts, the guy who is stealing, the faceless man who wants Pate to steal the key to the Citadel, in the draft, instead of stealing a key to get in, he was just having him steal the glass candle directly. So it kind of implies what the faceless men were after at the Citadel was a glass candle. In this version, Pate brings the glass candle to him, and the guy explains, not only can you use these things to communicate over long distances by projecting your consciousness, you can bind yourself to these, and the man who is bound to the candle will never die so long as the flame lasts, but it needs to be recharged from time to time with blood. So to me, this is the exact fire parallel to the weirwoods. They're a magical entity that you can bind yourself to, and as long as you constantly feed it blood, it will sustain your life. So as long as you keep feeding the weirwoods blood, it'll sustain the green seers. If someone like maybe a Melisandre would be bound to a shadow, or bound to a glass candle rather, in the Red Temple, perhaps that's how her life is sustained for hundreds of years, because she doesn't need to eat, because the thing keeping her alive is off in a shy somewhere else. That could be what George is doing. We don't know if he's keeping that power of glass candles or not, but I tend to think he's going to, just because it works so well with so much of the stuff he has set up, but who knows?
No, I'm reading the chat, Ford 8484. I am also right now having a conversation in my mind. If we're halfway through this outline, not even I don't know that we can just rush through the rest of it.
It won't be as quality. We could rush through it, then we'd have to come back for a part 2 anyway. Maybe if we cover it quickly, we might want to come back to more anyway. But I don't know. I'd be down for part 2.
Cover whatever you think, Dave. I'm easy. I just wrote down George's lore that I think he put together, and we can skip through to whatever you think you'd like to discuss.
Well, did you order these in the order of the game, or in order of importance? Have we done the best stuff and now it's just getting tangential, or is this going through as the game goes?
So this is the timeline of Marika's takeover of the lands between us.
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah. So we could even just say, Marika, as the power of the Erd Tree, just wipes the whole lands between, and essentially takes over, takes power, and then we come in. She well, we could probably get to the shattering, where
Yeah.
the Night of the Black Knives is probably the main thing, where
Okay.
Godwyn the Golden, he's murdered using this rune, a knife imbued with the power of death, and that kills him in soul alone. So his soul is killed, but his body's left alive, and it's then interred within the roots of the Erd tree.
Well, we just skipped a whole bunch of stuff. So this is what I don't want to do, is skip all this interesting stuff. Should we? Is there enough left to do a part 2 is what I'm asking.
Oh, okay.
I think the way we could split it easily with where we're at, and Eldrick, you wrote the whole outline, so let me know if you agree. But if we covered like a lot of the lore and up to like the shattering, because like all of this stuff is stuff that happened thousands of years before the game, pretty much. We could cover a lot of like the background lore type of stuff, split it off at some point, then come back to the stuff you actually experience more in game. Is that kind of how the outline is set up? If I'm
Yeah, a little bit. So the in-game stuff is more written by Miyazaki. We can. There's a whole. I've got a whole section, part 4, which just discuss basically the Erd tree and the weirwood comparing each other. You know, the life cycles of death. You know, we've got the green man and that Erd tree avatars. We're watering trees with blood. It just discusses more of like, even down to the Erd tree or burial catacombs, which seem very much like the Stark crypts. So yeah, I probably
It feels like we can actually get most of what we need to do if we stick with this for a little bit longer, huh?
If you're happy.
yeah.
Okay.
If we go another
Because
hour,
I would rather
and
get it
don't.
all in one stream if we can. I might need to go get some more caffeine. And then we can get another 30 minutes or so and work our way. Because I want to hear about this full moon queen, Ranala. I'm not trying to skip that.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I like moon queens, by the way. That's well known. So
yeah, there's a lot of parallels over to the Night's Queen with
so
them,
let me
for
do
sure.
this. Let me hit the music. We're all listening to the music. I'll go get a drink because you got to explain this to me. It won't work for me to run out while you talk. Yeah. So I'll hit the music. Everybody likes the music, and let's see. We'll go with, what should we do? We'll do this one. And we're back. All right. Sorry. I have floors. I have floors now.
You're gonna get fit, dude.
Yeah. You need.
Sorry.
All right. So yeah, where were we? Queen of the Full Moons was muted, I think, as well.
I want to know about my future wife, Ranala, the Moon Queen. I'm single, by the way. I need a. Okay, go ahead.
So Ranala, Queen of the Full Moon, she is part of the Carrion royal family, and the Carrions are astronomers, and they study the stars, and they use glintstone, which contains the essence of the stars, to draw magic from. And she met the full moon take that for what you will, when she was young, and the moon made her a queen. It's almost assumed that the moon itself, there might be a god attached to the moon, because how do you meet a moon? I don't understand how that works. And there's several moons, and it feels like bringing in the age of the moon. There's almost an outer god behind it that's trying to bring their age about through Rennala, and specifically Rennala's daughter Ranni. So what happens? They sort of coincide with the Erdtree and the Golden Order for a while, until they enter into a war with the Erdtree. What happens is Radagon, this person who's just appeared, which will make a lot more sense as we move through the timeline, ends up marrying Rennala of the Full Moon to bring their order under the Erdtree. So yeah, there we go. So we've got Rennala on the left and Radagon on the right. We've got Radagon with his red hair, and Rennala, the Moon Queen, and they essentially join houses to coexist both orders underneath the Erdtree.
Which is interesting, like, compared to the Ancient and A Song of Ice and Fire, the idea of the tree and the moon wedding to create a temporary order, like, is very interesting. I don't know if it seemed like something that David would be like, wait a minute, this is just like my one theory. And then,
Yeah, it's a very Azor Ahai, Nissa Knight's Queen stuff going on. We've got our Red King and our White Queen. And that goes right back to alchemy, which we're about to get right into. I
always forget about the red and white being an alchemy thing.
So myself and Michael were discussing this yesterday about the red and the white, and we'll get to it a little bit further when we discuss Radagon a little bit more in detail. But just for now, put a pin in. We've got a red-haired, very Azor Ahai figure marrying this queen of the moon figure as well, which is very much feels very A Song of Ice and Fire.
I mean, the trees are always trying to grab the moon. We see that. There's a strong connection between the moon and the weirwoods. Yeah, Michael believes.
At the night for the fingers of the tree reaching up to grab the moon and pull it down into the well. Yep.
Absolutely.
So to get back to this family tree, Radagon and Rennala have 3 children, Ranni, Rykard, and Radan.
Yes, they do. So Ranni is that, you've seen her with Blythe, her Shadowbound wolf. She's an Empyrean. She ends up casting her body aside because she doesn't want to be a puppet of the Golden Will, essentially. So what you're seeing there, that is not Ranni's real body. That's a puppet. And Ranni's spirit is attached to that puppet through her one closed eye. You can sort of see there's a spirit face next to her face.
Yes.
And they sort of join through there. That's actually Ranni. Yep, there. And that puppet is modeled on her mentor, which we only know as the Snowy Crone. And she met the Snowy Crone in her youth and taught her all her magic, and sort of, I think, impressioned on her that the moon and the age of the stars needed to come ahead. So Ranni discards her Empyrean flesh. That's how she describes it. She discards her body because if you're an Empyrean, you can become a vessel for a god, and she didn't want that. So she discarded her flesh to become just a spirit.
Okay.
So that's what that's all about. But yeah, lots of Knight's Queen symbolism and imagery going on.
Worth noting, she in her current form looks pretty much exactly like the Knight's Queen, and then you can find in game her body is still laying where it was, and it looks pretty much like Melisandre. She's redheaded, witch-looking Melisandre, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, we've been speculating that Nissa turns into Knight's Queen, and even that Melisandre could turn icy. That there's a flip that you could do or something. That's
or just even like there was an icy version of Mel in the past, and we see what it caused. Now we've got a fiery version. Are we really going to do the same thing? That could be the question that gets raised. Yeah.
Yep.
And then there's a similar Eldrick, what's this picture?
So that is Radagon and Marika, which we're about to get into.
Radagon, you
Yeah.
scoundrel!
Yeah.
Well, we'll get the
What?
bomb on David. I'll let you drop the bomb about these two, Eldrick.
So what happens next after Radagon and Renala, the Moon Queen, are married? The whole Lands Between sort of comes under the one control, and Marika's happy because the whole Lands Between is under the Erd Tree. So what happens is Godfrey, her first Elden Lord, who she had kids with, like Godric and Godwyn.
Yep, remember him.
She kicks him out. She says, "You're out. You're off. You and your mates, like your army of what we now know as Tarnished. She strips them of grace, which that grace of the Erd Tree is what gives people life. So she strips them of that grace, and they have to leave. So the Tarnished basically get exiled to a distant land, which is assumed to be death. And then just put a pin in that, because I think later on we return. Our player character is a Tarnished character. We get given life again by Marika to come and fix the Elden Ring. So she can take grace away from us, or life away, keep us in a realm ready to sort of come back when required, and give that life back to these warriors to come back to fight on her behalf. So Godfrey's kicked out, and then Radagon comes back and marries Marika, leaves Renala completely heartbroken. Ranni and her children sort of then despise the Golden Order and the Erd Tree, and which is why they're trying to force this Age of Stars to sort of oppose the Erd Tree.
So hold on, let me ask a question here.
Mm-hmm.
So, Radagon and Renala marrying was good for Marika because it united the realm under the Erd Tree, but then she broke up the relationship by stealing Radagon, which turned Renala and her moon children against her. So why did she do that? That seems dumb, or it's self-destructive.
Well, they were still under control of the Erd Tree. I think they were sort of plotting behind her back. So we still had Ranni and Rykard sort of as a part of the Golden Order, but they were plotting beneath the surface to overthrow it in a way.
And I don't know what exactly the situation is here, but didn't he leave Renala with a child or like an egg? She's clutching an egg forever. What is, because he left her, like, did he have a kid with her, or like in some way he kept the control, I think, essentially, without, like, the marriage was to gain them into the order, and then at some point she was like discarded and betrayed, sort of like when she was no longer needed, was the vibe I got. And so she sits there like clutching this egg, angry about the betrayal for forever. Right? Yeah,
because so she has the rune of the unborn, and that, I think it's an amber egg, and she's trying to sort of will it to life. Yeah, but she's broken, completely broken. But I think the big spoiler for Elden Ring is that Radagon and Marika are actually the same person. They're actually the same being.
So that's the bomb drop I was waiting for. Yep, this betrayal was her the whole time. Her shadow is this guy. He's a projection of her consciousness.
So that Marika and Radagon are the same being in the same. They're two beings in the same body, essentially. Yeah, and
Jaime
they can.
And Cersei on a divine level, taking up the self-love, being so in love with yourself that you can't marry anyone but yourself, on a godly level.
Okay, so wiping the expression off my face, I was thinking of Jaime and Cersei and the way they are mirror images of each other, and they are a personification of Narcissus looking into the stream or whatever. So that would be a similar idea. Is it supposed to be a reconciling your shadow thing? This doesn't seem like that.
It's an alchemical thing. So it's that alchemical. The alchemical wedding is so. In alchemy, they were trying to create the alchemical rebus, which was a being that was the reconciling of opposing matters. So male and female together in one body would become the alchemical rebus. And
Baphomet, kind of.
Is it?
Well, I mean, it's one.
if you Google, I should have sent the picture, sorry, mate, but alchemical rebus, you'll see, there you go. So you've got the red king and the white queen combining. So on one side, you've got, the male, you've got the sun, gold, red, fire, combining with the female, the moon, silver, also associated with green, I found out as well in some pictures and lore. But this alchemical rebus is the way for alchemists to create the philosopher's stone, which was to combine opposing mediums into one being to then gain immortality. And I think this is what's going on with Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa and the Weirwoods, because that red and white, that's exactly what we see in the Weirwoods. I know Dave speculated over the years that potentially the Azor Ahai sacrifice of Nissa Nissa involved the Weirwoods, and that potentially both spirits became one, like we see with Varamir and Thistle, where Varamir enters Thistle, they become two beings in one body, and then potentially bounced into the tree to become this red king and white queen. And the Weirwoods are red-leaved and white-trunked. We've got this red and white.
The red leaves are a symbol of unification, yeah, in that sense. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
It's the fire is in the tree,
Yeah. And the leaves are described as fiery, and the trunks are described as like moon pale and glowing like moonlight. Yeah. We've got that fire and sun and moon, male and female. Even the Weirwoods themselves above ground tend to sometimes be described as male, and then sometimes below ground described as female. So they've got, and it's an above trees in themselves are a chemical rebus. You've got roots above, as in the branches, and then you've got the roots below. So it's this the dual aspect of the tree of human nature. And I think it all comes back to what a god truly is, in that gods can create life, and to create life as a human, two need to become one to create the power of a god, if that makes sense. So create life.
To access the godly power, you need to do this alchemy. Yeah.
And to give birth is almost a form of immortality, because you're passing your own genes on to become, it's not you, but it's almost you. And I think George is almost playing on that as well. Yeah. So
absolutely. And this is by Emily Balavet. This is called Alchemical Wedding. I've used this art many times over the years. It's not an Ice of Fire artwork, but obviously it's applicable when we're talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely part of what George is doing with Azor and Nissa Nissa. So these two are the same people. Okay, that's twisted. That's like more incesty than incest.
And that's what everyone says. This is what George has done. This is the only thing George has written.
The haters.
Is this super incest.
Well, this definitely was from him.
For this.
It definitely was.
It was.
It's very much.
There's more.
Like Michael said, very much a Jamie Cersei. Yeah, two beings, one body. That alchemical rebus, and it amazed me to see the Elden Ring community talking about alchemical weddings after having listened to David for years as well. You know, Danny's alchemical wedding, and we got the Red King and the White Queen, and it's same stuff, sun and moon. And
the thing I was going to ask too, when you brought up, so that egg that she's holding is the rune of the unborn. Is that another rune that's part of the Elden Ring in the same way the rune of death is? Okay,
yes.
So what I'm gathering, and this is me just trying to piece together Elden Ring lore, then is the point of what they did then, you bring the people under Rennala into the order, but then by betraying her and leaving her in a broken state, holding this rune of the unborn, it's kind of getting at like the psychological fear of like trying to bring life into this world, and what if, it doesn't work or whatever, and she's trapped there forever. But it's also like, it's serving the purpose of separating the Elden Ring even further. If she had to put the rune of death into a blade to keep it away from the rest of it, if the goal was to separate the Elden Ring out as part of creating her perfect order, trapping part of it and also trapping a competing god's champion with it is like it's a two birds with one stone kind of situation. And all she had to do was break the heart of this divine being eternally so that she's broken forever.
And for sure. And it makes sense when you actually sit back and think why Radagon did what he did. It's if it is in fact Marika that's doing it, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
You know, he went to marry, have children, and then become under their order, and then just left and went back to Marika. And but we don't know the ins and outs of how
you only
the two
care about
beings, one
yourself,
works.
Dad and Mom,
And
Dad, Mom.
both of you.
Yeah.
So we don't know how that actually works, whether they were once two beings or whether that we don't really know.
It's a
the
mystery.
ins and outs
Okay,
of it,
so
but,
real quick, Shadow of the Erd Tree, SOTE, Shade of the Evening, SOTE.
Oh dang, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I just noticed that someone in the chat abbreviated it,
that
Shadow
is
of the
good.
Erd Tree, and I read it as Shade of the Evening, and I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of the same thing.
And the Shadow Tree is spelled SCADU, which is the Old English word for shadow. SCADU. So SC in Old English is a SH sound, so shadow. And that shadow word, that's where the word shade comes from. So it's a shade tree, essentially.
Yeah.
The shadow tree, shade tree, same thing.
That is... That's great. And George, here's the thing that they said about the Shadow of the Erd Tree
the
DLC.
Shadow Tree. I'm sorry. I'm having a private joke. I have a friend.
No.
Go ahead.
Oh. No. Okay. Oh, I was just going to say they said that George didn't write any new lore for the DLC, but they had so much that he wrote the first time that they did take a lot of stuff George wrote that they just didn't get to put into the original game. So the DLC is pretty much as much George influenced as any of the rest of it, which is a lot, I think. But we didn't. He didn't like sit down and be like, "Well, this was the DLC is going to be like." It's
I've noticed that only on a very surface level at this stage. Like one of the dragons in the Shadow of the Erd Trees, Bale the Dread, which sounds very much like Balerion the Black Dread, and he's a black dragon with some, pretty horrific injuries.
The name is what?
So the dragon in Shadow of the Erd Tree is Bale the Dread.
Okay, so this is just Baylor of the Evil Eye. Then that's going to be the origin of that name. You're familiar with that?
Very reminiscent. It rings a bell. I reckon I've heard you.
It's
speak
from
about
Lug.
It. Yeah,
it's from Irish myth. Not Irish. Celtic. That's Celtic, isn't it? Lug and
I'd have to look. To be honest, I can't remember.
But I'm bad at remembering which is which. But Baylor of the Evil Eye is one that George has been working with. But that's why all of his Night Kings have Bale names, Bale-related names, and it's the Baleful Eye, like the Evil Eye, Euron's Eye, the God's Eye.
Gotcha.
Someone tell me if Lug and Baelor is Irish or Celtic folklore. Somebody in the chat that knows. But yes, I've talked about that before.
Also, when we're talking about like these little names that sound like references and things like this, one thing me and Eldrick also talked about is it's like, we're not saying that George was like, name the dragon something that sounds like Balerion, but like these people were a big fan of George and his work. So like one example that we've both talked about is they put a turtle pope in the game. There's literally just for seemingly no reason, big giant turtle wearing a pope hat. That's just this ancient being who just tells you world building information.
Wearing a hat?
Wearing a pope hat.
It's like a proper pope.
And it's clearly a reference to George loving turtles. So there's a giant turtle who tells you cool world building facts that George probably wrote a lot of. And it's just a clear reference to George, but I'm sure that George didn't write, oh yeah, and I'm in the game as a turtle pope. Like,
that's right.
They like George, so they're referencing him in addition to the fact that he worked on it. So that just also muddies all the waters of trying to figure out what exactly he wrote and what he didn't. But yeah.
So it's Irish. So the Irish folklore is not the same as Celtic folklore. They become combined at a certain point, but there are certain stories that are different. And you'll note there is a pan-Celtic god named Lug. Okay, I'm not even going to get into all that right now. So Lug is Proto-Indo-European. But yeah, that's not really important. Sorry. Okay. Let's see here.
We're almost halfway, but based on the scroll bar.
What's that?
We're almost halfway through the outline based on the scroll bar.
Well, we're most of the way through the parts to the ancient history. So
yeah. So that's essentially the conquering of the lands between. Now that Marika and Radagon are together, they have a few children, Mikola and Melania, and
Hold on, how can they have
potentially-
children if they're okay? Never mind.
Yeah, these are the questions we ask as well. But the whole time
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that reveal because, like, yeah, it paints all of it in a whole new light. That whole family tree. If you pull up the family tree again, you see where they are. They're the top of it, but they're the same person.
Yeah,
they're
so
the core of it, basically.
I see. So
Yeah.
Marika has children with Godfrey, and then as Radagon has children with Renala.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then has children with
Marika as
herself or
Radagon.
themselves. And it tends to be so Mikola and Melania that they have are both cursed. Mikola is cursed with eternal youth, and very Bran comparable character. And Melania, which I've got the Melania shirt on, she's cursed with the god of rot living inside of her. So these are cursed twins. So it's very much the only healthy child they had was really Godwyn. The rest of all seem to be like they got the cursed Omen twins. That's Mikola there, yeah. They're almost like Marika. They have an alter ego named Saint Trina. It's like a god of sleep, and they're assumed to be the same being as well. But yeah, that's essentially the conquest of the lands between. Essentially, now the Golden Order rules all. The Erd Tree is seen as this holy deity, and everything's all sweet until someone. So essentially, what happens? We have the Night of the Black Knives after this, which is the inciting sort of event that kicks off the start of the game. So the Black Knife assassins that you can see there killing Godwyn. They are a group of all-female assassins from, they think of Noxan origin. They're sort of, and they have this blade infused with the rune of death, and you're sort of left to wonder who's done this. But it turns out, in the end, spoilers, that Ranni is the one that's been has concocted this plot. So what they do is they carve the curse mark of death into Godwyn, half the curse mark, and you can see that half semicircle in his back. That kills him in soul alone, leaving his body in a state of undeath. And they carve the other half onto Ranni to kill her body permanently and be done with the Empyrean. She doesn't want to be an Empyrean anymore, like we discussed, and leaves her soul alive. So they get half the curse mark of death each. Godwyn's body's left alive, and Ranni's soul is left alive, and she attaches that soul to a puppet to then operate around in the world. But this was the reason it's implied is because Ranni's trying to bring about the Age of Stars and overthrow the Erd Tree. So kill off Godwyn the Golden, and this causes Marika to shatter the Elden Ring, and the shards of the Elden Ring sort of scatter across the world. The demigods all collect these shards to try and grab power, as if it's a Game of Thrones. They can see that the current reign of power has been destroyed, and everyone's grasping for power. It's almost like a War of the Five Kings in a way, where the demigods are trying to, scramble to gather forces, and essentially they can become the next Elden Lord if they want to and remend the Elden Ring, but they don't. Nothing happens, and the world's just left in a broken and decaying state. And that's where we enter the game. We get called
So
forth
why did
by
Marika
Marika.
do the shattering now? Why did she break it?
And that is a big question. That is so potentially in grief for the loss of Godwyn. Potentially, I think maybe because we've got to remember that Marika has the greater will through the Elden Ring inside of her. So maybe what Marika has been doing, maybe that's the greater will and not her. Maybe she's had enough at this point and is shattering the Elden Ring to be free of the greater will's influence. That's the way I sort of see it.
That's what I agree with. That's the most compelling to me, is that she, much like potentially some of these old green seers down in the caves who maybe don't want to stare at a cave wall for eternity, she was brought into this deal thousands of years ago to gain power. And then at some point she realized, oh no, I want to die. If that's what the lesson of immortality is in these books, is like it's a trap, it's a prison that you are lured into and trapped with. if the beings attached to the weirwoods want to die, that would make a lot of sense. And that's why I kind of think Marika also probably wants to die, because like both properties, we don't know for sure, but it makes the most sense in both of them to me. So this is a perfect example of something where I feel like it gets stronger when you compare the two and see the similar themes and how the evidence for it lines up. But it's the human heart in conflict with itself on the divine level, because it is this godly being who is partially human, who is conflicted about what it wants. And that I think the Weirwood system's probably conflicted about whether it wants to live or die, and we'll probably see that with Bran. And I think the Greater Will may have wanted to remain in control, whereas Marika didn't want that. So therefore, the Greater Will is in conflict with itself, and that's the war that we're seeing, is the order of the world in conflict with itself.
This is really making me think about Nissa Nissa so much, and the idea that she's in the weirwoodnet. Like when we look at the characters who play the role of Nissa Nissa and or Night's Queen, a lot of them are trapped. Some of them are trapped, but still pulling strings and having power, seemingly to have an agenda. What is that agenda? It's some sort of rebalancing, but we're not sure what. It might not be going back to where it was originally. But she's like the weirwoodnet is Nissa Nissa in some symbolisms. You know, that's what it looks like. It's like
the same way Marika is the Golden Order. Yeah, it's
like when
she's a
Nissa Nissa
physical
dies, her
manifestation.
awareness becomes the basis of
I agree.
like the receptacle which the human green seers can put their spirits into. Like they couldn't do it before then. The weirwood trees didn't hold people before then. It was this killing of Nissa Nissa that modified them so that they could. So it's that one when Ygritte is in the Winterfell heart tree pond in John's dream, and she melts into blood and bone in the pond. So it's like Nissa Nissa is turning into weirwood, blood and bone, and into the sea. The pond turns red. So it's like the weirwoodnet sea is Nissa Nissa's blood.
Yep. I fully agree that is the most, like, this has made it go from the most likely to one where I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm like pretty dang sure the sacrifice of Nissa Nissa went into the consciousness, like in a Gaia type of way, right? Like this woman becoming this earthly goddess figure. She was the original sacrifice that probably kicked it off. Yeah.
And I think that's the sense of Dany's undying vision, where she's giving herself and falling into the canopy of bloody hands to free all the slaves. It's like, she's going into the weirwoodnet canopy. She's transforming the world in doing so. She's also analogous to the Mother Earth figure, with the dwarves are biting at the woman who's like laying down or whatever. Like that's the Earth goddess, and she wakes up and it's the undying biting her. So it's like, of course, Dany is the quintessential Mother Goddess figure of the story. So it really would. And again, if you've read some of the Shannara books, there's one called Tanaquil, and this is a lot of Greek mythology here. But basically, there's a female heroine who has gone through so much. She's had to walk the valley of darkness, and come back and stuff. And the only peace that she can have, kind of Frodo-like, if you will, is to turn into like a holy tree. And it gives her like a retirement of kind. And this
is like exactly what I think's gonna happen to Dany. Like the reason that I had to do an entire like Elden Ring deep dive is because I'm like, I think this is what is gonna happen with Dany. I think in the end, the reason I talked about this last time I was on your stream a little bit with the Weirwood system, I think the reason she may be killed in the end is partially a resetting of the Weirwood system to end the Long Night, because if the system of order going away is what causes the Long Night, you need a new system of order to return. Dany's entire story has sort of been like her giving up the things that she wants to give freedom to her people. George pretty much said that, like, that is a big point of her Marine arc. She has all of these ideas about how she wants things to be run, and slowly she has to reopen the fighting pits to keep people safe. She has to do whatever. Eventually, if she has to give up her life to keep people safe, Jon stabs her magically in some magical context. And this is kind of why I brought up earlier Jon going north like that fire giant, because the warging consciousness, when Varamir dies, it seems like the warg consciousness jumps to the nearest vessel it can. If the weirwood itself is the original warg consciousness, this thing, when you burn it, what I think is going to happen, Dany is going to burn the tree with her dragon. This weirwood consciousness will, on some level, jump to the nearest thing it can, which will probably be Dany herself. And then, in some sort of magical way, Jon killing Dany can have that consciousness on some level. Some of it will jump to Jon. Maybe the old, like, evil part or whatever can jump to Jon. And enough of it can go into the new world tree that the world tree spirit can be in the new tree. The old ways spirit or whatever can jump into Jon, and he can carry that negative part north forever and guard it in the way that I talked about. Like, this is another one of those things where I'm like, I don't know how to get to this point in one of my videos where this makes sense, but once we've been talking about Elden Ring for 2 hours, like, this tracks really well to me. When you talk about Dany always talking about how she wants to plant trees and see them grow, like, if Dany turns into the new tree goddess Gaia by the end, like, that makes the most sense to me.
Well, so here's my version of what you're talking about, or something that corresponds to some of this. I think that the thing that's in the Weirwoods now, the consciousness that Bloodraven is assimilating to, is what needs to get out of the trees. I believe it is Bran who will download that and take that out of the trees. Yeah. I think that Jon and Dany might be the ones who lead the spirits of the White Walkers back into the weirwoodnet. Like, this is the two-part thing. Like, the original sin, Azor Ahai invades the weirwoodnet and pushes the green spirits out that become the others. They're now exiled out in the cold. So we're pulling Azor Ahai's hive mind out of the net, and we got to stuff the others back in. So the thing that we noticed about Dany is that when she frees those Unsullied, who are like whites, she then becomes their leader and leads them. Yeah. So it's like if Dany's burning of the slaves to free this, or burning of the slave masters to free the slaves pattern holds up, she'll fight the others, but then she'll be leading some of these spirits back home. Now, it could just be the whites that she's like giving release to, and that could fit with her becoming the new tree goddess. That's not quite the same as stuffing the others back into the trees.
What I would say is, I think there's a chance that these spirits are, like, essentially their home. They would view their home as death. The place that they may want to go is into the trees, yes, but that's also just another form of eternal life that maybe, if the Weirwood system wants to die, also isn't the greatest. So, like, I could see a situation where what you're saying about leading the spirits home, burning the Weirwood system could fulfill that same, like, magical thing, and then the system, like, could still latch on to Dany in a similar way. But yeah, I do think, like, her freeing those spirits is definitely something that she'll do, and I think those whites especially, like, because they still remember some of what they knew when they lived, is something that Gior mentions when the whites attack him. They're like, they still remember things. So if those are dead spirits that are literally forced back into their corpse of a body and are like Hodor, just down in the pit while the body is being controlled, those spirits will probably want death as the thing that they actually want. So if Dany burns the whole system, I think it could be both of what we're saying pretty much in that one action.
Yeah, there's a lot of fire purification imagery that seems to apply to all this. So,
and yeah, they're pointing out Dany is the moon goddess as well, kind of. Ranni is the moon. Dany is called the moon. Drogo's the sun and stars. Dany's got a lot of moon imagery as well. So she could become the next moon if there's not a next tree. And it's weird that she's set up to become either of them on a spiritual level, with the planting trees and watching them grow and the moon of my life foreshadowing. She could physically become either one, I think.
It makes more sense for her to become the tree, because we know people go into trees, but the tree and the moon are analogous symbols.
Right.
So
I agree. It's most likely the tree, but it's weird that it could be both. And, you know.
And then the other related idea is, if the way that we can maybe stuff the White Walker spirits back into the weirwoodnet is by Jon and Dany becoming a Night's King and Queen, becoming icy so that they can lead them, and then they would be going into the weirwoodnet as well. So I'm not sure, obviously me and Michael just tossed out a bunch of, tinfoil hat conspiracies, but this is all just like the proximate structure of how this ending could go, different ways that it could go. But you see how they are following similar thematic tracks, bones, skeletons, if you will. So Ranni, she becomes the new moon. Is that what you said?
She's basically like a representative of the moon. She tries to usher in the age of stars on behalf of the outer god that sort of either resides in the moon or is associated with the moon. And so that's why we have her plotting with the Black Knife assassins to kill Godwyn, and then we have the shattering of the Elden Ring.
So that reminds me of, if I could just say, that reminds me of Night's Queen. Like, she's killed as Nissa, and then as Night's Queen, she's got vengeance on her mind. So she's could be the one killing Azor Ahai, the last hero, or some figure like that. And so here we see Ranni, or not Ranni, Ranni's mom.
Yeah, Marika. Yeah, yep.
No, and not Marika. The
Rennala. Sorry, yeah, Rennala.
Rennala, right? So Rennala is wronged, and her daughter is pissed, kind of.
Yes, yeah, and carrying on that age of the stars on her behalf, nearly. When we fight Rennala in game, she's sort of weakened and clutching the egg, like Michael said. But after we sort of finish phase 1, this spectral version of Rennala pops up that Ranni has organized to protect her mother, and we fight the full power version of Rennala in spirit form, and Ranni sort of, it's a great fight. But yeah, Ranni, we basically very much
do look like a band that in Arcadia's right. This looks like a band. We just need Girl Nettles as our singer, and we're like a strange, like kind of like, we're like a punk band, but with like a little new wave or something. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I could see it.
Okay.
I think you're the keyboard player, Eldrick. I hate to break it to you. And Michael is obviously playing drums. So we don't have guitars, just bass, keyboards, drums, and vocals.
As long as I don't have to sing, I think people will be happy.
Burn your wicked garden to the ground. Don't make me do my Scott Weiland, because you can't do it at low volumes. That is correct. You have to belt it out to really get it. So we don't need that. So what we've got here. Okay, so the shattering of the Elden Ring. Go ahead, Eldrick. They're trying to claim the remnants. They're trying to take the power. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, it basically breaks the current order so that it can give rise to a new order to come through and take place and sort of take over from there. And AGT Jake is another Elden Ring YouTuber that brought up an excellent parallel between this assassination of Godwyn being the inciting version of this sort of breaking of the world with back to Baldur. So in Norse myth, Baldur is immortal. He can't be hurt. He can't be killed.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, Baldur.
And
with the death of Godwyn.
Yes, yeah. And so Godwyn is thought to be unkillable because the rune of death has been removed, sort of thing. So he's thought to be immortal as well. But no, he's dead. We can kill him. And that seems to be the inciting version where Marika then shatters the Elden Ring. The world descends into chaos, and it gives rise to a new order to come through and sort of rebirth the world, which is exactly what Ragnarok is. We have Baldur dying, and then Ragnarok sort of ensues from there so that the world can be rebuilt anew again. And I thought that was a great comparison. And I wondered if it translated over to A Song of Ice and Fire. And I wondered if this was what they were getting at with the assassination of Bran, because he didn't get assassinated, but there's an attempted assassination of Bran, this sort of golden, his direwolf is Summer. So he's this Summer character, this Summer king, and he attempted assassination. And then after that, we have the inciting versions of, the War of the Five Kings occurs, and then everything breaks down into chaos so that it can be reborn anew. So
there is also the chance that the assassination hasn't come yet. There is, in the show, we saw the Night King invade the cave where Bran was. So like maybe the tossing from the tower isn't even like the apocalyptic like attempt to take out the future like godly kid. Maybe the Night King will try to do something like that too, even beyond what we've seen already.
So there's a lot of, I did a stream called Symbolism of Hodor. I was going, which one? Symbolism of Hodor. Bran is Baldur. and Hodor is Hodor, and they're doing a Baldur Hodor thing together. So that's absolutely confirmed. That checks out.
Yeah. So I thought it was a really good parallel across to a lot of Norse myth. We've been discussing Odin already so far, and back to Baldur and Ragnarok in general, just being the breaking of the world so it can be rebuilt. It's in both, the cycles.
Marika, what was she before she was imprisoned in the Erd Tree? Was she like just walking around like a?
Yeah. So we hear in dialogue that she was involved in the war with the fire giants. So she was out there on the field, sort of speaking to the masses. So it wasn't until the shattering happened that she was imprisoned within the tree. So she shatters the Elden Ring. It all happens, and then the greater will sort of locks her inside the Erd Tree. Then, so she can be held eternally against her will, and the Elden Ring and the greater will can influence the world through her body against her will while she's imprisoned within the tree. So that's why we see her sort of in that crucified pose, because the greater will needs this Empyrean on Earth to influence the lands between, and because she's tried to, and that's what also tells me that maybe she was shattering the Elden Ring to stop the greater will's influence, because as soon as that happened, he locks her in the tree and held against her will slowly turning to stone. So
I'm just remembering that I asked you earlier if Marika is more Azor Ahai or Nissa, and I think Michael chuckled when I said that.
Yeah.
Together, yeah. She's both.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what we see with the Weirwoods. Same thing. We see Azor Ahai and Nissa within the Weirwoods as well. That alchemical wedding, So yeah, that is where the beginning of the game kicks off, where we are one of Godfrey's tarnished, who's been exiled into death, and we get brought back from death to become the next Elden Lord. We got to go around, defeat all the demigods, collect their shards of the Elden Ring, and then mend them back together to bring the new order. And we can choose what order we want to go. We can choose the order of the Erd Tree. We can choose the order of the Age of Stars, which is Ranni's ending, where the moon becomes the next order. We could, it's the best ending. It is. Yeah. We can even choose the ending.
I spotted it right away. I want credit for that. Go ahead.
You've done well. The ending of the Frenzied Flame, where we bring about the destruction of everything, just burn everything to the ground so it can start again, which is almost what happens in nature.
It's the Elmo GIF ending.
Yeah.
It's something that happens in nature as well. If we see, with wildfire roars through a section of bush, and then a new life rises up from the wildfire, burning everything to the ground so the new can be built again.
Suthor for the win. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So that brought to mind the tarnished being brought back to life when the world's breaking and needs help, brought to mind the green zombies theory, and even Odin as well. With Odin, he has his dead warriors in Valhalla that he can call back forth from death to fight in Ragnarok. And then
green zombie theory, right?
Yeah, potentially. I think the green zombies are in the Winterfell crypts, and I don't shut up about it. I'm not gonna stop. But what if we have these dead warriors within death that can be called back from death to fight in the long winter?
79 Sentinels.
Well, what if? 79 Sentinels, that sort of stuff. So
out of the wall to fight when they're needed.
But as soon as you start the game, you start as this tarnished and you come back to life. And
so there you go.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of theory confirmation. I didn't make a list, but that's a lot. I mean, it just says we're barking up the right tree. I'm not really even interested in one particular thing here, because then you got to get into, are you over-interpreting, whatever. But you can sort of see what's going on here in general, that we're thinking about the right things, and we're trying to think of, what screwed up the weirwoodnet? Is there an entity in there? Is it trying to get out? Does it need to be transformed again? What were the weirwoods like originally? These are good questions to be asking. So
yes,
yep, for sure. And what we've just described is basically what George wrote. Miyazaki and his team took over from this point and wrote the game. He built the world, built the wars that happened, the conflicts, the characters, and then had this shattering event, and then handed it over to them, and they ran with it.
How George
So,
is it that you start off the game thinking your mission is one thing, but then you're given all this stuff to make you question that, so that you might get to the end and be like, actually,
burn it all
that's
down,
right.
baby.
this Erd
Well,
tree.
that's exactly right. Yeah, and as soon as you start, all you know is that the Elden Ring's been shattered, and you got to go collect the runes and fix it. And then as you go through, you see all these atrocities occurring around. The fire giants have been killed, and like Renala and Radagon been split, and she's left broken, and there's all these broken people, and she's done horrible things to consolidate this power. And you sort of go, well, the Age of the Stars, that's the go. We got to bring about the Age of the Moon,
Yeah. It's the same vibe as in in the books. You're like, oh yeah, the Weirwoods are great. They're awesome. The old way is super cool. But then you're like, oh well, there is that one line where Bran's scared of the tree, and then in like the last book, you're just like, oh wait, they are hanging entrails in the tree. And so it's like as you go, you're just getting this build up of like maybe these trees ain't the way. I don't know.
That's right. Bloody screaming faces and. Yeah, I'm not sure this is healthy.
Bloodraven basically recruited Bran to come live in a cave and eat his friend, and
Yep.
That's what you want.
Yeah, very George
for the greater good. Sorry. Cool. Well, this has been really super interesting, just on its own merits. I mean, it's a fascinating bit of world building, but obviously fruitful for the ice and fire angles, and there it is. I mean, like I said, if you take one thing away from this story, it's just that, or from this stream, it's just that like channels like ours we're barking up the right tree, the right Erd tree, if you will, and any given theory crosses a certain point and becomes speculative, but this is the way that we should be looking at the world building mechanics of the game. I think I make the point, but I really appreciate you guys coming on and bringing this, Eldrick especially, with this outline. And Michael, thanks for all your observations here. I think you did a really good job of making some connections between the Elden Ring stuff and the Ice and Fire stuff that I didn't even wouldn't have seen right away. So.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to bring, because he had the whole outline, you had the fresh reaction. I'm like, I'm gonna try hammer the connection points.
I can't feel my face. Like, there were some pretty I mean, when I looked at the art, I was just like, okay. So what's
even visually,
what's this now? Is this the Elden Beast in different form?
No, so that's an Erd tree avatar, and that is a tree being that sort of arose after the shattering. So the Erd tree was damaged after the shattering, and minor Erd trees started to sprout around the world, and these tree guardians arose to protect these trees after the shattering. And I drew a parallel to the Green Men, which were an order formed of tree beings to protect the trees after the shattering by the Hammer of the Waters, and we have Marika shattering the Elden Ring with her hammer, and the green tree men arising to protect the trees. So if you want more, I've got a video on Elden Ring that goes into all the Erd tree and the Weirwood parallels. And this is a part of that. But I mean, we could go for days if you wanted to, but
for days if we wanted to.
Crikey.
Well, like I said, I spent a whole month. Well, it's more that I dated an Australian person for a while, so
you have the license
take credit for anything here. In any case, I do want to give you credit again, Eldrick, for preparing all this presentation, and both of you guys for getting together before the stream and organizing it. I should have you guys do my work for me more often. This was easy. Make sure you subscribe to their channels. Like I said, Michael Talks has new video that he just put out yesterday, which was really cool. It's about free will and the Weirwood. And I would just one thing, we'll just take a couple minutes here. Michael, have you watched Dark?
No.
Okay, you've heard me talk about it though.
Probably.
Everybody who's watched this channel has heard me talk about Dark. Watch Dark, everyone. Three seasons on Netflix. I think it's the best time travel fiction ever written. It deals with free will and fate and destiny in a very interesting way. And one of the key principles is that it is people's nature that determines their choices. And that is what sort of predetermines things. It's not like, oh, there's just some, I just have to do this now. It's like people do the same thing in these multiple loops or iterations of reality because they have the same sort of urges and stuff. And you hit on that exactly. So I really think you'd like Dark, and I think you would get it very well. But
okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That's, I think, exactly kind of what Helena's telling Eamon. It's like, this isn't going to change anything because you're still a hothead who's going to go try and do dragony things. And I won't get into
there's
any
a
more
villainous
details
character in Dark who figures this out. And he's like, the only way I can be free of fate is to kill all my desires. And so he literally tries to do that, but not in like a hermetic, I'm going to go live in the desert way and give up attachment. Like he literally tries to kill bang, bang his desires. And it's like, okay, this is a dark place you've gone to.
Yeah, you've misinterpreted that a little bit there, but maybe rethink.
He's like, time is God and I want to kill God. I was like, okay, you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, check out Michael Talks About Stuff. Make sure you're subscribed. And Eldrick, like he just said, has more Elden Ring on his channel, as well as many other great videos. And I did a lore summit with each of these guys, basically to set up this stream. I didn't want to bring you guys on when my crowd didn't know you, wasn't familiar with you. So I had each of you on to talk about some of your favorite theories. So if you didn't catch the lore summits, one was on Winterfell with Eldrick, and then the other one was on the Weirwood system with Michael. And those are two of the best streams I've done in quite a while. So thank you, gentlemen, both. And in case you missed them, they're there. So
yeah, thank you for having us. It's great.
I will eventually have other people on lore summits than these two.
We won't let him. We're gonna hog this, hog these seats.
The whole thing was a sock puppet to do this Elden Ring stuff. So Trojan horse. All right. Well, thanks, guys. And remember to click like on the stream, little thumbs up button. And if you want to, you can hit refresh when it's over and leave a comment. And that would be super cool. Awesome. So cheers, guys. And I will see you soon with some sort of newer video. I think I'm working on Jon Snow Azor Ahai next. So watch out for that at some point. And we are going to do a cool Halloween themed stream next week. I'm not ready to announce it yet because I need to confirm with my guests. But it is going to be very fun, be sort of game oriented and horror themed. So make sure you plan on hanging out with me next weekend for I'm calling it, I think Halloween is Thursday, right? No, you're looking at me like I'm very wrong. When's
I don't know. I
have no track of time, man.
It doesn't matter when it really is. What matters is that next Sunday is our Halloween stream. That's all that matters. Yeah. So there you go.
I was going to do math, and that look was me remembering, I don't remember what day it is. And then I'm like, oh, wait, football was today. It's Sunday.
Yeah, next Thursday. Thank you. All right. Very good. All right, guys. So spooky. Yeah, spooky stream next Sunday. I'll put the announcement on the YouTube feed when I figure out, when I get all the guests confirmed. So that's it. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Subscribe to these guys. Cheers.
See you, everyone.